Events begin to take place in a well-guarded mansion, near which there is an incredibly large number of guards. Literally the entire territory was protected from unwanted guests, as well as bandits who could soon attack. Meanwhile, a girl named Jiang Ming and a guy named Pashan were arguing with each other that they needed to get out of this place as quickly as possible, because they could be in danger. Pashan was indeed very self-confident, and convinced the lady that she should relax, because this was just a small gang of killers, and they would only be able to scare other people. The brave man himself was sure that in Southeast Asia everyone was afraid of him. Suddenly, a mysterious girl appeared behind her, who had a mask on her face and 2 pistols in her hands, one of which she pointed directly at Pashan's head. The couple lying in bed was shocked that so many guards could not stop the killer who entered their room. But as it turned out, the mysterious girl sincerely believed that the guards were really good, but still they could not cope with her. Immediately after this, the killer decided to take out a card on which the victim was indicated to be eliminated. As soon as the card was studied, the killer girl realized that she needed to eliminate Pashan, which is why she fired. The shot was aimed straight at the villain's head, and after hitting, he began to experience incredible pain, which made him scream with all his might. After eliminating her target, the girl immediately wanted to kill Jiang Ming and was about to shoot, but suddenly someone shot directly at the intruder. Instantly the killer realized that it was a sniper, and Jiang Ming immediately reached for her pistol in order to survive in such a difficult situation. The alarmed lady grabbed the pistol in her hand and immediately began shooting continuously, because the desire to survive was incredibly strong. Unfortunately, after firing many shots, the clumsy girl was never able to hit, because the killer had incredible lightness and was able to dodge absolutely all the shots. In order to avoid death, the smart girl decided to jump out of the window, because the cost of a mistake was too great. As it turned out, there really was a sniper sitting on a hill nearby, who fired directly at the mysterious girl. This outcome of events pleased the sniper, because now he understood that the mission was completed and the bait was abandoned. Some time later, events continued to occur in a coastal city in South Asia. Evening came, and many people walked around the market in order to have a little fun and have a snack. The young guys drank alcohol and spent time together after a hard day at work. A group of former odnoklassniki also sat nearby, talking with each other. They drank alcohol, and only one young man did not want to drink it. The refusal to drink alcohol greatly confused one of the companions, and he could not understand why the guy refused to drink, because previously he was one of the best in their school, and now he simply works as a courier. In any case, the smart young man believed that it didn't matter who he worked with, because besides, he was not interested in other professions, and this was just a job. But according to a classmate, there was no difference in what profession he had, but there were differences in what kind of person he was. After all, this society was hellish and realistic, and once the hierarchy is established, it is really difficult to overcome. Another classmate stopped them and asked the classmate to predict their fate right now. Without hesitation, the girl agreed, after which she asked Ding Yino to give his hand. Dean nevertheless decided to give his hand, and his former classmate asked him not to show off, because she usually took a lot of money for it, but now she just needs gratitude. Looking at her hand, the girl was able to find out that in the near future Dina would be very good with women. Also, soon, the young man should have a romantic meeting, and for him it was really not bad. Continuing to look at the hand, the lady was still confused, because she saw something very unpredictable, and for her it was really strange. Suddenly, Dean stood up and began to leave, asking him to wait a little. None of those present understood where he began to go. As it turned out, he approached the scoundrel, who had previously taken the wallet from an ordinary passerby, and turning to him, asked whether he really liked being a scoundrel. From such a surprise, the bandit immediately got scared and wanted to find out who this mysterious guy was, but he only asked to return the money, and then perhaps he would not call the police. Taking out his knife, the criminal ordered the guy to get lost, and if he ran to his mommy, he would not kill him. Using his dexterity, the young man was easily able to intercept the bandit's hand, and thereby took the knife from him. Using his strength, Dean was able to stop the criminal and grabbed him so that he would not harm anyone else. The brave guy immediately realized that the criminal was not afraid of the cops, but he also did not like them, which is why, according to the law, they could not deal with this situation. That is why the main character hit the criminal's face on the asphalt with all his might in order to teach him a lesson. The bandit's head began to hurt very badly from the force of the blow, because this blow was unexpected for him, since the main character was going to teach him a lesson in a different way. The criminal tried his best to avoid another blow, and shouted not to be touched again, because he was in great pain. At this moment, all the friends had already begun to approach their comrade, and began to worry about what had happened, because before their eyes, an ordinary courier was able to defeat the strongest bandit. Some time later, the events continued to occur at the police station, and the bandit apologized to the policeman, saying that he would not disturb him again, and next time he would invite him to dinner. Immediately after this the scoundrel was released, and he did not receive any punishment. Watching everything that was happening, the hero was truly shocked that the police did not take any action in this situation. The bandit was very happy about this outcome of events, and also said that he could not be a bandit without knowing several police officers in order to avoid punishment, and he also said that he remembered Dean Eno. With a wave of his hand, the man simply exclaimed that they would see each other again in the future. The alarmed comrade asked his friend to be careful, because everyone understood that the criminal would soon return for him. Thinking about everything that was happening, the hero understood that villains are not sent to prison. This is an era without justice, all the bandits have been caught, and he wants to destroy them. Suddenly, she decided to run up to her classmate and told her that she wanted to predict his fate, but she couldn't see Ding Yino's future. All she saw was the bloody mist, which is why he needs to be careful. These words amused the young man, and he thanked all his comrades. They agreed and bluffed together. With a wave of his hand, Dean Eno began to say goodbye to his former classmates, and asked them not to worry, because everything would be fine with him. In pursuit, he also told the girl that she should no longer make predictions like that to anyone, otherwise she would be left alone. A few minutes later, the young man found himself in a gateway, walking along it during the pouring rain. Looking around, he noticed something unusual, and realized that he needed to look around. Coming closer to the trash cans, the boy discovered something that really shocked him. As it turned out, it was a wounded killer girl, and Dean Eno realized that it was not in vain that his girlfriend said that he would be lucky with women in the future. Looking at the girl's body, the young man saw that she had a photograph of a very famous businessman, Bong Pashan. He immediately realized that the mysterious girl was really in big trouble. Looking at her, Ding Yino also saw that the stranger was indeed seriously injured, and he even thought that he should pretend that he had not met her before. Having touched her body, the guy seemed to feel something, and it immediately dawned on him what exactly was happening to the stranger. A picture appeared in front of him where an unknown person was standing on fire, and his entire body was covered in flames. Unexpectedly, the mysterious girl raised her head, because she felt that someone was standing not far from her. Taking out her gun, she immediately began to threaten Ding Eno, because she thought that he wished her harm, but the guy began to deny it, saying that he could help her. The masked stranger only said that she would not give him anything in return for his help, and that it would be a selfless act. Taking something out of his pocket, the young man said that he did not have time to explain. Smiling, the boy put on his cap and said that if the stranger wants to live, then she should do as he says. The protagonist's car was parked not far from the house, and they rushed to it in order to escape from the scene. Dean only asked the girl to be patient a little, because she was in a trash can and had to hide there so that no one would see her. Walking down the street, suddenly, the young man noticed a group of men nearby who were exploring the area. The men were dressed in black suits and looked like secret agents, and they also radioed that the search results were unsuccessful. A young man who looked like a garbage man began to walk past the men, and reacted to them completely calmly, even though they were armed. For a seasoned investigator, this was truly strange behavior on the part of the scavenger, because anyone who saw this would be surprised. At the same time, the young man and the stranger had almost arrived, and there was very little left. Suddenly, one of the men pointed a gun at the guy and stopped him, shouting after him. It was all because none of the scavengers were so calm, and this was really very suspicious. The hero realized that he really behaved too calmly for an ordinary person, but unfortunately, he realized this too late, and one of the men opened fire, hitting the trash can several times. A mysterious stranger jumped out of the trash can and, taking out her pistols, began shooting at the villains who dared to attempt on their lives. Her shooting was truly impressive, as she was able to easily eliminate one of her attackers. The smart young man hid behind a trash can all this time in order not to suffer from an accidental shot. The other enemy continued to fire in order to eliminate the killer of their boss, because that is what they were sent for. The stranger continued to shoot, and did everything possible to save her life and the life of her new partner. A few seconds later, the hero got on a motorcycle in order to escape from the scene, because he understood that their lives were in danger. After the motorcycle was started, Dean Eno ordered the stranger to get into the car so that they could leave here as soon as possible. They continued to drive away at top speed so that their enemies would not be able to catch up with them. The tuxedoed agents continued to shoot at the trailer, hoping that they would still be able to hit their target. The brave girl also fired back. Using her 2 pistols, she continued to shoot accurately, in the hope of exterminating each of the enemies. Unexpectedly for herself, she noticed that multiple shots at the body of the trailer damaged it. Using her foot, she decided to knock down the door in order to fire more effectively. Thanks to her dexterity, Killer was able to break out a window in the trailer and start shooting right out of it. She also had an unusual device in her hand that she could use to fire explosives. Thanks to the force of the explosion, the main character and the girl were able to escape from the scene, because of the explosion, the enemies could not see where they went next. Watching everything that was happening, the agents realized that they would not be able to catch up with their target. The most experienced agent began to say that they still had to be sure that their enemies would not go anywhere, because at the place where the shooting took place there was one of the pieces of evidence, namely a cap on which the name of the company was displayed. After some time, the tired guy stopped his motorcycle and asked his companion to get out of the trailer, but he noticed that his partner was not reacting at all, which is why he decided to go out and see what happened to her. Looking into the trailer, the young man discovered a terrible picture, and never expected this to happen. Unfortunately, the girl who so bravely shot her enemies died and could no longer fight evil. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in the mansion from which this story began. One of the agents began asking the widow if she could cooperate with them in this investigation, because they really wanted to know if Jiang Ming had seen the killer's face. The woman only said that everything happened very quickly, and she could not see the face. If she had other information, she would definitely tell the agents about it. In fact, the special agents did this in order to avenge Pashan, who had previously helped them in everything. Saying goodbye to her husband, Jiang Ming ordered the agents to leave, because she wanted to be alone. Approaching closer, one of the servants reported that this killer was saved by his partner, but Jiang Ming asked to leave him with Kurogi, because the enemy was much stronger than they thought. The slightly alarmed man bowed down and exclaimed that he would definitely take note of this. Agents who had previously tried to avenge the death of their boss were also connected nearby, but they failed. Bowing to her deceased husband, the girl said that the agents must be given a chance to correct their mistakes, and again they must go to avenge the death of Pashan. After kissing her husband, Jiang Ming also vowed that after he left, she would definitely come back to see him. At the same time, events continued to occur at the fishing pier. Standing in the rain, the protagonist thought that he had blown his cap and the delivery van was damaged, and Pashan's servants would definitely follow them. And also, they will find all the Handa delivery points in the city and start looking for the killer's assistant. The young man's point was not the closest to the place where everything happened, but they still would not be able to track him down so quickly. Having penetrated one of the delivery service enterprises, the young man only thought that he would hide for as long as he could, and it was time to change to another delivery van, that way he could buy himself some time. Stealing a motorcycle, Dean Eno began connecting wires together in order to ride the vehicle. The actions with the wires were indeed not done in vain, because thanks to them, the hero was easily able to start the motorcycle. Suddenly, the guy found a strange note on the handle of the motorcycle that was hanging on a rope. He immediately decided to look at this note, and thought about what had happened to him, because he almost killed a man, years of hatred, and he finally received a clue that cost him very dearly. Now this was the best way, which means it is necessary to become even more evil, but this does not mean that Dean Eno will become the same as the killers who were previously eliminated by the killer. Since he saved the mysterious girl, if anything happens now, the killers will come to him. A few hours later, events continued to occur in the main character's house. His classmate was already yawning and getting ready to go to bed when suddenly she heard a knock on the door. As it turned out, it was Dean Eno, who wanted to ask the girl for help. Entering the room, the boy sincerely apologized for coming so late, and still wanted to ask for something. He needed to leave something at the station, and as a sign of gratitude he was going to get a massage so that the act would not be selfless. Looking to the side, the hero also decided to ask how the stranger was feeling. It turned out that in fact, the mysterious girl was alive, and she held on, although there were many wounds, but most were minor, with the exception of the bullet wound. This is just a penetrating wound, and the stranger was in excellent physical shape, so her life is no longer in danger. Now Killer was unconscious, and would remain in this state for another 2 days, which is why we must not forget to give her medicine. The caring former classmate also handed over a list of medications that Ding Yino needed to buy. To the guy's surprise, his girlfriend was really a good doctor, like a professional who performed expensive treatment. These words angered her friend a little, and she exclaimed that she knew medicine much better than her strange friend. Still, people who met the last one didn't know where she got these wounds from. A little alarmed, the friend nevertheless decided to find out whether she and the mysterious girl were friends, or were sleeping together. She literally asked to tell her the truth. Grabbing his girlfriend by the shoulders, the young man began to confuse her very much, but decided to tell her something. The girl's heart began to beat much faster, and she blushed, because she could not expect Dean to behave this way. This behavior was surprising, because a former classmate could never imagine that such a handsome man would pay attention to her. As it turned out, in fact, he just asked his friend to return home and have a good rest, although at the same time her eyes were literally darkening from embarrassment. At the same time, the stranger continued to be unconscious due to the medications she received. Suddenly, memories from her life began to appear in her dreams, where she fought with many opponents. These memories immediately made the girl wake up, and she felt unbearable pain. At this time, the protagonist's girlfriend began to insult him, because she expected something completely different from her friend. Looking at his interlocutor with a charming gaze, Dean Eno suggested that she go to dinner sometime. This proposal made the lady very happy, and she was literally enchanted and fell in love at first sight. Because of her charm, she was never able to notice how she was already pushed into a taxi, and she had to go home. A little embarrassed, the young man began to say goodbye to his girlfriend, and she was literally furious, because no one had behaved like that with her before. Dean Yino still felt guilty for his actions, and apologized for taking advantage of his girlfriend's feelings for him, and he realized that he did not deserve her friendship or her love. Entering his home, the boy began to observe the stranger again, and saw that she was unconscious. Immediately, he began to inspect her equipment to understand what technology she owned. Her costume was indeed very impressive, and her equipment was cute, but still, he wanted to see what the stranger really looked like. At this time, with the help of her equipment, the girl could observe the young man who saved her. Feeling very interested, the boy literally began to look under the mask and asked to be given the opportunity to look at the lady's true face. Suddenly, there was a clicking sound, and the girl's mask disappeared somewhere, after which she asked if she looked good. At that same second, for some reason the guy flew off at incredible speed into the wall and hit it. All this is because the stranger could not stand such behavior and kicked her savior in the stomach with all her might. In great pain, Dean Yino asked the girl to wait, because he saved her life, and did not understand why she kept threatening him, as if she did not take him seriously. Taking a fighting stance, the young man exclaimed that he practiced kung fu and therefore could fight back. Realizing that this was not the case, the mysterious girl simply continued to watch him and did not say anything. Events continued to happen the next day, when the hero decided to visit the pharmacy. In order to maintain the condition of the rescued girl, he purchased a large amount of medicine. Standing at the checkout, Dean Eno was only thinking that lately it seemed to him that he had been cursed. After all, enemies or later they will check his company, and as a colleague, he must tell his partner. Suddenly, a new message arrived on the young man's smartphone, and he immediately began to take out his phone. It turned out that his partner had just written to him, saying that some scoundrels were looking for Dean Eno. He needed to lay low and not come to the company anymore. Many armed people came to the company in order to interrogate one of the employees where Dean Eno is located. In fact, it was a bandit who had been severely beaten by the young man earlier, and the delivery man couldn't tell where exactly Dean was because he didn't know. Feeling very angry, the scoundrel just wanted to find out by any means possible where exactly his offender was, and ordered his comrades to smash everything here. Unexpectedly, the young man decided to come to the delivery service office and turned to a scoundrel nicknamed Broken Nose. This treatment greatly angered the bandit, who dared to invade the main character's work and interrogate his boss. Using his unprecedented strength, Dean Eno immediately neutralized the two villains who were not far from him. Waving his hand, the good-natured guy said that earlier he had heard that the bandit already missed him. Immediately after this, only screams and shouts from the bandits, as well as strong blows, were heard in the building. Literally a few minutes later, the boss already thanked his employee for helping in such a difficult situation. For the bandit himself, all these events turned out to be sad, since he was humiliated in front of his comrades. Addressing the bandit hanging by his feet, the young man wanted to tell him only once, and he must remember it. Dean Eno wanted to say that if the bandit ever hurt the people around him again, he would kill him. Looking the young man straight in the eyes, the criminal felt that he had already met such a look before. This look was only reserved for criminals who were the most evil prisoners in prison, and this guy was a real monster. That is why the bandit realized that there was a real killer in front of him now, and it was better not to disturb him ever again. Pointing to the door, the good-natured guy said that they had better get out of here and never come to this building again. Smiling, the scoundrel tried to apologize, because he felt guilty, and understood that the boy was really strong, and he should never conflict with him again. The main character's partner watched these bandits and thought that they would not return again, and this was indeed the case, because they would be afraid that Mr. Wang would beat them thoroughly. After thinking for a while, Dean Eno still decided to warn Mr. Wang that he was leaving the company. For the man, this was a truly unexpected statement, and he did not understand why the young man decided to leave. At this time, the hero still could not explain why exactly he was leaving, but in a word, he would never be able to return to work for this company. And if someone comes looking for him, the boss must be told that he does not know the young man. Angry, the man immediately thought that Ding Yino was in trouble because of these scoundrels, and asked him not to worry about them. As he left, the guy explained that his uncle didn't need to look for a reason, and he should remember that he needed to pretend that he had never known a person like Dean Eno. Continuing to smoke, the man just looked into the distance and thought about why such a smart and capable young man behaved this way. Suddenly, someone behind him began to approach the man, and apparently wanted to ask something. As it turned out, these were indeed people, and they introduced themselves as agents of the Postal Association, and wanted to check the condition of the vans. Meanwhile, the bandits were hiding in the bushes and communicating with their boss. The scoundrels discussed among themselves that they urgently needed to leave the city, because this brat was too strong to be dealt with so easily, and now they were ashamed of it. Meanwhile, the boss began to pull out an object from his pocket to show it to his partners. It was a bottle of medicine. The scoundrel thought that this guy must have some kind of weakness, and thus he wanted to find out how it was possible to defeat him. Thanks to this medicine, they will now be able to cause trouble for Ding Yingo, and take full revenge on him, although they will not be able to deal with him, but there is someone who can, which is why it was necessary to call Officer Liu and tell him what for him there is some task. Some time later, events continued to occur in the main character's house. The young man, along with the medicines, began to go inside the apartment in order to help the mysterious girl whom he had saved. Putting the medicine on the nightstand, he decided that he needed to first talk to the girl, and then give her the opportunity to take the medicine. But as it turned out, she was no longer in the bed, and the young man even thought that she had run away. In fact, the stranger was very close, and she hid like a ninja in order to understand if she was in danger. Soon after this, the stranger took out a blade and began to threaten the young man, saying that he was a good person, and it was really hard for her to wait for him all this time. A few minutes later, the girl was already devouring all the food brought, and shouted that she would not share food with her savior. Also, the girl completely undressed the guy and began to humiliate him, although he saved her out of the kindness of his heart, and she is only trying to harm. The girl couldn't stand the boy's threats and immediately started shooting, the bullet flying right not far from his head. The girl simply didn't care, and she even wanted to punish her offender, even though he was not guilty of anything. Unable to bear it, the young man began to shout that those who were hunting for her could find themselves here at any moment. She needed to leave as quickly as possible. All these events made the hero very angry, but the strange girl did not react to this at all. Putting the gun directly to the guy's head, she began to say that perhaps he was mistaken, because the only one who would soon die was him. The alarmed young man could not understand why the girl was behaving this way, because he saved her, and she couldn't leave him, because even gangsters have their own rules. Unfortunately, this girl is a murderer, which is why she decided to say goodbye to Ding Eno because she was already tired of him. After that, she began to pull the trigger of the gun, intending to fire. Feeling very anxious, Dean Eno began to shout at her not to do this, because in fact, he had another goal. At the same time, he understood that now death was a couple of millimeters away from him, and after 1 minute it would shoot. Because he collected, although Dean often lied in his life, and for him it was habitual behavior. For a few minutes the young man simply fell silent, and the girl could not stand it, which is why she hit him with a pistol, because he seemed to want to say something. The hero decided to ask if Killer believed in fate, and if she had ever thought about it, why they met together on that cold and rainy night. Starting to cry, the guy said that he just thought it was a special meeting, but when he imagines that the girl is fighting against these guys with a gun, it just breaks his soul. He didn't want to feel guilty when he realized that he wasted his time and achieved nothing, and life is short, and he wanted to make it unforgettable. Thus, even if this girl was a bandit or a murderer, he didn't care, which is why he asked for the opportunity to help her. He also received 2 higher educations from the Royal University, if she wants to destroy this talent. Then the drama king named Dean Eno will give this opportunity, and she can shoot. The girl was even a little offended by these statements, and she praised the young man. But unfortunately, she is not his trophy, and she cannot be deceived so easily. Presenting the gun to the guy's head, she pulled the trigger again. As it turned out, there was no bullet in the gun at the moment, and she handed it to Dean, saying that he was really funny. Smiling, the lady also exclaimed that she would still give him another chance. Pointing a pistol at the courier, she indicated that soon an unfamiliar man would be present in this building. The first lesson for an assassin would be to be cold-blooded, and of the 2 of them, only one can survive, and it will be a fight for life and death. The girl was about to count to 3, and Dean Eno could not understand how this was even possible, and why he would kill a stranger. It turned out that the courier needed to find Dean Eno in order to deliver the parcel to him, and the neighbor kindly told. The angry lady continued to shout at the guy so that he would make a decision as soon as possible regarding the need to kill the courier. All this time the young man was watching the unknown man and deciding whether to shoot him. Presenting a knife to his throat, the lady continued to threaten, saying that if he did not do this, then he would die. Dean Eno could not withstand such pressure, and began to fire numerous shots from the pistol in order to kill the stranger. All the bullets missed their target, and the chaotic shooting did not lead to any result, because the shots were missed. Because of such clumsiness, the girl hit the hero right on the head with all her might, because she did not understand how this was even possible. It was noticeable that the courier had unusual abilities, and very skillfully made a somersault in order to dodge. As it turned out, the courier was undercover, and in fact it was the agent who reported that the target had been discovered. After which, he announced to all teams that it was necessary to begin the operation, and taking out a submachine gun, he began to shoot directly at the window. Realizing that danger awaited them, the mysterious stranger began to hide behind the young man's back, in the hope that the bullets would not hit her. In a few minutes, a huge number of agents were already present right next to the main character's house, and they were about to carry out a capture operation. An alarmed neighbor turned to the officer and began to say that his daughter was still in the building. The officer didn't care at all about this, and he just looked at the man mockingly. Immediately after this, he shot the stranger directly in the head, saying that they would soon meet their daughter. Meanwhile, the young man began to scream with all his might because the stranger had shot him in the leg. The pain was incredible, and the hero literally cringed from it, not understanding why she did this. As it turned out, the girl believed that the guy should protect her, which is why she decided to shoot so that Dean Eno would not get bored. Winking at him, she exclaimed that she loved him and apologized for her actions. Another shot rang out, and the young man was wounded twice already, which is why he experienced even more severe pain. Finally, the stranger wished him only an air kiss and said that he needed to take care of himself. Feeling very angry, Dean Eno began to shout that he would definitely kill her for what she had done. Suddenly, the door to the main character's room was knocked down, and there were a huge number of agents near it. Trying to escape, the brave girl exclaimed that if Ding Ino survived, then she would take him as her student. Analyzing everything that was happening, the hero understood that it seemed that the end had come for him, and he also looked like a fool. Realizing what had just happened to him, the young man only concluded that all women are evil, and this girl was still unusual, so she was an even more threatening and dangerous evil. Entering the room, the agents saw that their main target was running away, and it was necessary to act. The boss grabbed one of his charges by the head and wanted to perform a trick. Having grabbed the soldier, the boss began to fall on him from the window, as if a living person were a snowboard. After the most dangerous jump, the boss was able to survive, thanks to the fact that the soldier softened his jump. This time the scoundrel did not want to give the killer the opportunity to escape with all his might, and was going to follow her. He didn't even care what happened to him. Jumping from the wrecked car, the man began to act and quickly ran forward after his target. One of the soldiers watched his comrade, who served as material to soften the fall, and realized that this death was truly pathetic. These events made the hero think that these scoundrels don't even care about their own people, and they are completely inhuman. The soldier exclaimed that their former group leader was dead and now he would be the leader, which is why he ordered the other soldiers to help the captain. And this boy, who was here completely without clothes, had to receive his punishment. The shameless insolent also ordered the young man to be quiet, because the interrogation had not yet begun, and he did not need to speak yet. At the same time, the killer girl fought with a huge number of soldiers who were hired to kill her. There were really too many soldiers, and it was extremely difficult for one girl to cope with them. She also began to run out of ammunition, which made the possibility of escape almost equal to zero. Looking at her mechanisms, the stranger realized that they were useless, because there was no way to call for new ammunition. Smart agents immediately noticed that their target was starting to run out of ammunition and needed to move forward. But in this case, the soldiers needed to capture the target alive, and not kill it. Meanwhile, the interrogation began, and they began to ask the hero what his favorite pet was. Because cats are difficult to tame, they always have a desire to conquer, and Din Ino's eyes were like a cat's. The scoundrel was good at taming animals, cats, which he trained to be more obedient than dogs. When suddenly the police arrived at the scene of the events, the police found Din Ino's address very easily, because they needed to investigate the murder of one of the postal company employees. It turned out that the tip in this case was given by a bandit who literally hated the main character and really wanted to take revenge on him. A huge number of police bulletproof vests began to move towards the crime scene, because they also heard shots nearby. The brave girl, meanwhile, continued to fight, and thanks to the weapons of her rivals, she was still alive. The soldiers simply could not resist such a strong opponent, because it was difficult to hit her, since she was also very dexterous. One of the military decided to take out a rocket launcher in order to blow up his target and not give her the opportunity to fight anymore. Seeing that she was in danger, Killer immediately began to run away, realizing that she could not cope with an explosion of such a scale. Suddenly, the girl's partner contacted her and said that the hot high heels queen looked sad. The indignant lady decided to tell him that she had run out of ammunition and his devices were not working. All the scoundrels around her thought that they could win, because there were many more of them. The partner was not against such an outcome of events, and asked her to do what she considered necessary, but also ordered her to take care of his technology. At this moment, Killer decided to use her secret weapon, and ordered her rivals to prepare for death. First, some strange metal structures appeared from her hands, and they were probably some kind of secret weapon. Grabbing the metal structures, the girl connected them together, which is why a powerful lightning aura began to appear. Thanks to the device that was used, the clever lady caused the Rift of the Worlds, attacking her allies. Each of the soldiers was simply shocked by what he had just seen, because it really looked like magic. The device in the hands of the stranger looked like magic blasters, with which she was immediately going to attack the villains. Thanks to the most powerful weapons, it was possible to win this battle, since powerful blasters could shoot lightning over vast distances. Watching everything happen, Bandit and the police were dumbfounded, because they had never seen such technology before. Soon after this, the police decided to retreat, because they could not fight against such a strong opponent. Now the captain knew that the police had arrived, but for them the most important thing now was to unhook the area, because they would be here soon, and they didn't have much time. At the same time, the villain continued to torture the main character, and did everything possible to make the young man speak. The soldier really enjoyed hurting Ding Ino, because he thought that the boy would be more talkative after a couple of blows. Trembling with pain, the young man began to say that it was the stranger who dragged him into all this, and he knew nothing at all. The criminal did not care at all about this, and he wanted to use brass knuckles to make the interrogation more effective. For a moment the hero lost consciousness, and it was as if someone began to talk to him. The strange voice kept calling Ding Yino, saying that he didn't need to stop. Seeing the strange entity, the guy was shocked, because he did not understand who was now in front of him. It turned out that it was the spirit of that same stranger, and she said that Dean had previously promised her not to give up and survive. Kneeling down, he just began to say that he simply was not strong, and wanted to rest at least a little, because he was very tired. A strange entity told him that he would never be able to get up again if he gave up now, and he should remember what he had just heard. Dean felt great fear while watching this entity, but remembered everything she told him. In such a difficult situation, he still could not refuse revenge, and it was necessary to take action. At the same time, the impudent man was already about to strike, and putting brass knuckles on his hand, he ordered the young man not to twitch. Because of all his strength, the guy shouted that he would never give up, after which he stopped the hand of the attacking soldier, thereby preventing his death. The soldier tried to do everything possible to strike and destroy the arrogant guy who was trying to resist. Not far from him also hung a knife, which he wanted to use in order to check whether the young man was really so strong. Trying to strike, the soldier took out a knife and continued to attack, pointing the weapon directly at Ding Ino's head. The main character's strength was so great that he was easily able to prevent his enemy's attack and damaged his arm. From such a counterattack, the scoundrel literally began to squeal in pain, because he knew that he could no longer continue to fight. Thus, the young man was able to take the initiative into his own hands, and understood that now he would complete this fight and finally win it. The skilled soldier was able to escape from the grip, after which he decided to continue the fist fight, but Dean Ino was much stronger. Using his leg, the hero hit the insolent guy right in the face with all his might in order to teach him a lesson, because he felt inhuman hatred towards him. Thanks to his dexterity, as well as his newfound strength, Dean Ino was able to complete this fight, winning with only a few blows. Because now the young man has a way, how to punish all enemies for their tricks, and they must die. In order to punish the soldier, he decided to use a cloth mask, and turned on a small stream of water, using an ancient torture to make his enemy go crazy. At the same time, the young man was going to fight further, looking for what he had previously hidden under his bed for a long time. Under the large bed was a huge suitcase containing something very secret. It was his grandfather's ancient bow, thanks to which he will now be able to take revenge on his offenders. Someday, Ding Ino also planned to avenge his grandfather with his own hands, because he felt great anger at losing him. Meanwhile, events continued on the battlefield, where some strange robots appeared that looked like huge bees. The mysterious stranger began to think that her enemies were joking with her, but she wanted to destroy them all. But as it turned out, against these enemies, the weapon was completely useless, because at the moment it was completely discharged. Looking around and watching the enemies who would be near her in a few seconds, the girl realized that in any case she could handle this herself. At the same time, the brave young man came out of the entrance and took with him a bow, as well as a quiver of arrows, in order to continue fighting. Looking around the entire street, he realized that the district police should be here soon, and he had to find his employer before they arrived. Now the hero needed to be a good citizen at least once and do a good deed. Fortunately, there was a delivery service vehicle nearby, and he decided to come closer in order to inspect it. Opening the trailer door, the hero could not understand why this car was not in the company garage. What he saw inside the trailer was simply terrible, and made Ding Yino very angry. The young man was literally crushed by what he saw. He was very sad, because he understood that a person dear to him had been killed. This event caused even greater anger, and the guy literally began to bend the metal door with his bare hands. All this made him even more furious, and he wanted to take revenge on everyone who was involved in Uncle Wang's death. A call arose at the secret headquarters, and many soldiers were equipped in the most advanced uniforms in order to destroy the criminals. Each of the soldiers present was ready for battle, because they had a challenge to shoot in the Sakura area. A huge number of shots were aimed directly at the mysterious girl, who continued to fight bravely and did her best to dodge. Moving closer to one of the cars, she first removed the door from it, using it as a shield. Soon after, the door was impaled directly on a huge katana in order to perform a secret trick. Thanks to her strength, the girl was able to easily lift the huge door, and then threw it straight at the bee robots. The door from the car was able to hit several bees, and there was an explosion of incredible proportions, which destroyed a small part of the enemies. Due to the explosion, the stranger was injured. She needed to use a secret technique because she knew that she was now trapped. Because of this, the partner only laughed, saying that fire and robots were really very strong, and he thought that the girl would cope much faster. The hired killer did not like such answers, and she exclaimed that her partner had better keep quiet, otherwise she would shove his gadgets very deep. The man began to deny his involvement in the technology malfunction, saying that it was a slight glitch, but he had adjusted her weapon, so she needed to be careful, because perhaps the charge would be too strong. The secret weapon was used, and now Killer was ready to fight round 2 against her enemies. I watched everything that was happening. The soldiers saw that their target was cut off by fire, and the bee robots also lost their target. The experienced military man understood that this weapon was very unusual, and it seemed to be occult science. Nevertheless, he ordered his soldiers to continue shooting straight away, and also to attack from behind the fiery curtain. The bees instantly continued their shooting, because the target had to be destroyed, and they were programmed precisely to complete the battle that had begun. The soldiers also continued to fight, doing everything possible to hit the girl with their fire. A lot of cartridges were wasted just to shoot into the fire, although the target itself was not visible. Suddenly, the girl jumped straight out of the fire, after which she rushed straight towards the soldiers in order to take revenge. Initially, she passed a huge number of killer bees, and immediately rushed towards the men who continued to shoot at her. The boss was simply shocked by this turn of events, because he saw that the killer was running straight at him. Each of the mercenaries continued to shoot, and the boss exclaimed that he was ready to fight, taking out his knife. Using her skills, the girl was easily able to destroy several dozen soldiers, and only one mercenary remained on the way to the boss. The brave warrior, using her weapon, was able to destroy absolutely all the soldiers, and got to the main boss, attacking him. The scoundrel was able to repel the attack with his hunting knife, and exclaimed that the reputation of the girl's killer completely justified her. Hearing this, the girl just shouted that she didn't have time to talk. Using her agility and strength, she also exclaimed that she was in a hurry, so she would not talk. The smart girl only believed that the mercenary boss was wasting her time, and he was not worthy to fight with her. Laughing, the scoundrel exclaimed that he was simply giving his life, and he had no hope of victory. As it turned out, thanks to a deft attack, Killer was easily able to destroy one of the mercenaries' hands, which is why he could now fight with only one hand. At the same time, the soldiers who were armed with the latest weapons were already approaching in helicopters. All units were ordered to prepare because arrival on the scene was expected to occur within 10 minutes. All this time, the police, together with the bandit, only watched what was happening, and were very afraid of the killer's girlfriend. Unable to bear it, the bandit decided to call in order to call the district police, but the subscriber with whom he was communicating only wanted to find out who wanted to call the district police. The policeman instantly stopped the scoundrel and hit him, because it was a walkie-talkie, not a telephone, and it was impossible to call the police on it. Immediately after this, the policeman took the radio and began calling the police about a terrorist attack in the Sakura area. A special squad was expected to arrive in their area, and he only hoped that they could cooperate in this matter. The mercenary continued to fight with the lady, hoping for his victory, although he could only fight with one hand. Looking around, he analyzed what was happening, and realized that he had 10 mercenaries left, as well as a couple of drones. Because of this, the scoundrel thought that it would be extremely difficult for the killer to get out of here, given the fact that many enemies were still controlling her movement. Suddenly, someone started firing a bow and fired many shots in a few seconds. Arrows that were fired using a bow are connected to grenades in order to produce a powerful explosion when the arrow hits. A huge number of arrows were fired at the drones that were trying to attack the girl. The explosions destroyed absolutely all the drones, as well as the soldiers who were nearby. The mercenary instantly saw that the killer had an assistant, after which several dozen arrows began to fly at him, and with a deft movement of his hand he began to fight them off. With the help of the ancient weapon, a huge number of shots were fired, and each arrow flew exactly to its target. Experiencing severe pain, the boss was at a loss because he felt that he could no longer win this fight, because he was no longer the leader of the battle. At that same second, the criminals saw that the same young man whom they had previously seen in a multi-story building was standing right on the roof of the car, shooting with a bow. This outcome of events greatly shocked the experienced fighter, because he could not believe that the wounded guy could fight so well. The smart Dean Eno apologized to his enemies, because his presence means that their boss no longer has a chance to win. Turning to the killer, the hero nevertheless decided to find out if there were still enemies somewhere, but as it turned out, there was only one enemy. This began to irritate the man even more, because he did not understand how to act in this case and what to do. Pointing at the boss of the enemy squad, the girl wanted to see if her new student could defeat the scoundrel. Dean Eno was perplexed that the girl spoke, interrupting him, and he began to shout at her because the girl should be silent when the men are making out. The scoundrel was very infuriated that the suckers thought that they were very grown-ups, but Killer explained to Dean Eno that they needed to end this fight because they needed to get out of here as soon as possible. Looking decisively at his enemy, the hero exclaimed that he needed only 1 minute. Jumping off the roof of the car, he also asked his girlfriend to start the countdown. The alarmed enemy continued to watch the young man, and thought that he should teach him a lesson. This lesson should have been how to survive in this world for such young people as Dean Eno. Fortunately, the boy was able to easily dodge the knife blow, and shouted that now his enemy would suffer during the fight. Using all his strength, the young man struck the villain straight in the face, using his leg. With the last of his strength, the wounded enemy shouted that Dean Eno would never be able to change this world, and everything would remain as before. Not listening to the scoundrel, the guy again hit his pitiful face with all his might, causing him to fly several tens of meters to the side. Looking around, Killer and the hero saw helicopters approaching. Also, a huge modern tank, which had super strong ammunition, began to drive up nearby. They started shouting from the tank using a loudspeaker to tell the criminals to drop their weapons now, otherwise they would be shot at. Looking at each other, the partners began to think about how to get out of here alive and not get punished. The hero decided to ask his new partner if she had a plan, but as it turned out, she did not think through the subsequent plan, because she thought that she would not receive punishment anyway. With the last of his strength, the scoundrel began to laugh and exclaimed that now the couple had lost. These words made the young man and girl extremely angry, and they wanted to finish off their enemy completely. Because to the surprise of the boss of the enemy group, he was saved by the police, and now he understood that he would have to pay taxes. One of the surviving mercenaries began shooting from a giant machine gun in order to stop the police and their arrival. Grabbing his bow, the young man used 3 arrows and shouted that he would not let his enemy escape because he had killed Uncle Vaughn and must now be punished. Multiple machine gun shots had no effect on the armored vehicles in which the special police squad was located. Unable to withstand such impudence on the part of the mercenaries, the police decided to strike back and use their weapons. Thanks to modern weapons, enemy armored vehicles were easily destroyed and exploded with just 1 shot. Without hesitation, the hero decided to shoot the villain to finish what he started and take revenge. Sensing the danger, the boss of the enemy group began to act, and pushed off Dean Eno with his legs with all his might to avoid death. Meanwhile, an armed detachment in super modern equipment advanced and began to gradually emerge from the armored vehicles. Thanks to his technique, the scoundrel was able to survive, and began to laugh, because it amused him. Because of this behavior, Ding Yino became even angrier and was about to take another shot with his bow. Special Forces soldiers had already begun to approach nearby, and they shouted that everyone who was here needed to stand and not move. Only the young man believed that he needed to complete what he started, and continued to hold the weapon in his hands. Laughing, the boss asked Ding Yino to watch and learn something, because this is the rule of survival. With every passing second, the police surrounded the criminals and ordered them to drop their weapons. Still none of the soldiers started shooting, and their commander repeated that everyone present here needed to drop their weapons. The The enemy squad leader, turning to the young man, shouted for him to continue attacking. Realizing that this was a trap, the hero understood that he should not do this. But his anger was much stronger, and he wanted to satisfy the scoundrel's desire and finish him off. The partner asked Dean not to be an idiot and not to do this. Although he knew that the enemy was provoking him, he wanted the scoundrel to die today. The experienced killer realized that killers are not people with emotions. Rule number 1 is that you need to get out of here, because only a living killer scares the rest. The evil scoundrel just decided to say goodbye, because the military grabbed him and ordered the others to throw down their weapons and lie down on the ground. Because of this situation, the young man began to get incredibly nervous, and his hands were literally shaking. Still, he decided not to shoot, and asked his partner what her future plan was. It turned out that there were knives behind her, and she was going to start attacking in order to get out. Initially, they lay down on the floor, and gradually the girl began counting down. After 3 seconds, the team snuck under the car in order to hide from many military personnel. As soon as they hid, an explosion of incredibly large proportions immediately occurred, causing the arriving army to be distracted. No one saw any opponents nearby, and the police gradually began to approach the scene of the explosion to begin a search. The mercenary boss understood that they had a plan, and it seemed that the pup would be trained to be a hungry wolf, and someday they would probably meet again. Thus, the soldiers were ordered to catch up with the villains in order to contain them, because many people were wounded. As soon as the armed police team got closer to the van, behind which the enemy team was supposed to hide, failure awaited the military, since there were mini-bombs under their feet that could explode at any moment. This is what happened, causing an explosion to occur again, and a huge number of armed military personnel were injured and killed. Fortunately, the smart warriors were already able to hide, and in order to escape from the crime scene, they climbed into the sewer. All this time, the police thought that the criminals were in the van, or under it, which is why they began to inspect it. To their surprise, it was discovered that there was absolutely no one in the cabin, and accordingly the criminals fled. The military also could not find anyone inside the van, and were extremely surprised by this fact. One of the police officers present decided to look under the car and realized that there was a hatch under it. Thus, all the soldiers learned that the entrance to the sewer was under the car, and it was necessary to follow there. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in the sewers, where the smell was incredibly terrible. In fact, at this time the team didn't care how it smelled, because it was a place to hide, and people always like to hide, which makes it a bad omen. The hero was really shocked, because he had never seen a girl so confused before, because she seemed too cool, as if these were the results of her training. As it turned out, in fact, the girl simply had a filter in her mask, with which she could breathe calmly, which is why she didn't care about the sewer. It was indeed very easy to get lost in this place, and the invincible warriors needed a guide, because it was as if they were in a labyrinth. Suddenly, the girl decided to take off her mask because she wanted to pull off an unusual trick. The mask in her hands was truly complex, and had unusual functions. And unfortunately, without a mask, there was no air filtration, which made the stranger feel very lousy. Immediately after the mask was removed, she flew into the air and greeted the assassin and the main character. Meanwhile, events took place at the police station. A strange black car drove up to the police station and stopped abruptly right in front of the entrance. There was a man and a girl in the car. The unknown person decided to ask if she had really thought through everything, because if she got involved in this, she could die. Observing a sign that said that this building was a police station, the girl said that if she wanted to prove her worth, then she should have her own chip. Shortly after that, they decided to go inside the police station, and once they entered there would be no turning back. The man was going to protect his partner, and he didn't care what happened there. Without hindrance they began to enter the premises and walked straight towards a group of police officers. It turned out that in fact, the strangers wanted to help the police and find the suspects. Together they arrived under orders, and it was necessary to investigate the Black Army group. Documents were also given, and the girl hoped that the police would give them the opportunity to arrest Pashan. The statement regarding Pashan's arrest was truly surprising for each of the police officers, because they understood that it would be very difficult. Because Baong Pashan was killed a couple of days ago, looking at each other, the partners were simply shocked by this news. At the same time, The mask led the main character and the girl through a labyrinth in the sewer, and nearby was the destination to which they had worked so hard. Making his way along the sewer stairs, the young man still decided to find out what kind of destination this was. As it turned out, it was something like a shelter. On the hatch that led to the shelter there was a secret combination lock that could only be opened with a fingerprint. Touching the combination lock, the girl was easily able to open it, after which they found themselves in the shelter. After that, they began to climb out of the sewer. The young man was really very surprised when he saw what was hiding behind this hatch. The shelter was truly impressive. It was not at all like an ordinary building because even the walls were golden in color. It turned out that it was the murderer's house, and the girl gladly invited Ding Ino there. Looking at the guy, Lady immediately thought that he was a little nervous, because he had been acting strange all this time. Without hesitation, the hero only replied that he had been through a lot, and he had nothing to fear at the moment, and there was no reason to be nervous. A few seconds later they arrived on the elevator to the desired floor, and the door began to gradually open. As soon as the door opened, the hero saw a giant statue, and a stranger who exclaimed that finally, something good happened today. It was a butler named Tan. He kindly greeted number 48, that's what the girl was called. Although the girl did not like this man, she understood that it was when he saw women that he became like this, and sooner or later the company would fire him, and she also notified that she needed medical attention and updated data. The card thrown to update the data was instantly intercepted by someone else and did not reach Tan. The card was grabbed by the spirit of ape, who walked on 4 legs and looked very much like a monkey. The creature was very happy that they finally met with number 47, although the ape spirit did not expect to see her in the South Asian operational circle. The monkey also really liked Tan's cunning face, but the man did not want to participate in this, and remained aloof from their business. Due to the fact that the girl had previously heard that Spirit Ape was the main examiner at the testing field, she wanted to propose a candidate who had previously been in her mind. Everything that happened really shocked the young man, because he could not even imagine that monkeys could speak. Out of shock, Dean Eno began to ask the monkey how he managed it, but the girl interrupted him and said that he was simply not very smart. Fortunately, the spirit of ape still agreed to look at this primate, but only a little later. The monkey also decided to ask if the girl was really injured, and she in turn answered that it was all due to an accident, because the sniper slightly spoiled her plans, and thanks to this mission, her rating should have increased. Watching the monkey, the young man still could not believe that it was real, and thought that it was just a remote-controlled robot. Jumping off the table, Spirit Ape explained that he had not yet chosen a test field to conduct the exam, which is why it was time for him to go. Suddenly, he turned around and said that Baong Pashan was supposed to become his prey, and this made him very angry. Based on this, the lady understood that the path of the protagonist's killer would indeed be difficult, because he has very influential competitors. Meanwhile, events continued to occur at Basong's residence. The wife of the deceased Pashan communicated with someone and said that she understood absolutely everything. It turned out that she was informed that the people who killed her husband could not be detained. Because of this she was simply furious, and began to destroy everything in her path. The butler decided to calm her down and came closer, but she did not want to listen to anyone. Jiang Ming now understood that without Pashan her life would be harder, but she still had to catch the killer in order to take revenge. At the same time, the investigators were discussing among themselves that it seemed that the Black Army and the mysterious killer had not shared something. Pashan had been too arrogant for the past 2 years, and sooner or later he would have been removed by the Blue Caves organization. Together, they wanted to take advantage of their conflict and force Baong to cooperate with them, and conflicts in such a community are like a small-scale war, and this is truly beyond comprehension. Now there was only one clue, namely the mercenary boss, who was the most important for them, because he clearly must know something. The mercenary boss named Kurogi, who was unconscious due to severe wounds, was extremely injured, but was still alive. At the hideout, agent number 47 was healing her wounds with the help of a very unusual device, and the hero realized that high-tech equipment, as well as unusual people, surrounded him, which made it seem like he was in another world. He also needed to pass some kind of exam on the test field, and it seems that his life is still dependent on others, but there is nowhere for him to hide outside. Right now, the hero needs to force himself to become stronger, and besides, this woman and the organization behind her can help him with this. Looking at his reflection, Dean Eno remembered exactly how his uncle, and part-time employer, was killed. These memories really seemed very cruel and terrible, which made the young man feel uneasy. Trying to calm him down, she only said that by taking this path, you can forget about the past. Because his family and friends would think that he was dead, and the girl hoped, but Dean Eno hoped to the last that he would not have to forget his loved ones. As it turned out, one girl who had previously helped him was still worried about the main character. She sincerely hoped that nothing happened to Dean Eno, because she had already called him many times, but he never answered the call. Since his disappearance, more than 38 calls have already been made, and all of them were missed, because Dean Eno never answered them. At the same time, someone was holding the main character's phone in his hands and saw that many people were calling him. These were investigators, and they saw that Dean Eno was mostly called by odnoklasniki, and it looks like this will not give them anything. The man saw that his partner was worried about the missing guy, and he didn't think that he would be a key figure, a college student who just graduated. Even if he has a connection with the Blue Cave, he thinks that there is nothing special there. The smart woman thought completely differently, not forgetting about Dean Eno's past, because he was previously a student at the Royal Institute, and also had 2 degrees in chemistry and physics. Previously, he was a test designer for the highest intelligence club in the United States. A person like this guy ended up becoming a courier, and now he is involved in this business, and there is clearly something unusual about him. Nevertheless, the investigators decided to go first and get to know those who called the main character earlier. At the hideout, treatment was successfully completed, with Agent 48 receiving treatment for 2 deep wounds, as well as 26 minor ones. Looking at the young man, the girl still wanted to know why he went to work as a courier. This question interested the boy, and he immediately thought that the stranger was interested in him. But in fact, if Dean Eno dies one day, then she won't be upset, if she still doesn't know the answer. The young man clearly did not like such an impudent answer, and he decided to find out the truth. Dean Eno approached the girl, and thought that it was unfair that only she was asking questions, and he also had a question for number 48, but the lady was the first to ask a question, asking why his wounds healed so quickly. As it turned out, the young man knew that this girl would ask anyway, and it seemed to him that his body had some special properties. With a wink, the girl exclaimed that they should find a place where they could sit and talk about it, because she was very curious about what was happening to him. Thus, the events continued to happen in the restaurant, where the lady wanted to know how Dean Eno defeated the mercenary who interrogated him, and as it turned out, he lost consciousness, and as soon as he came to his senses, this guy was already finished. While drinking coffee, the girl thought that her interlocutor was definitely lying to her. The boy denied this, saying that he had no need to lie, and he himself wanted to know the answer to this question. Confused, Madame realized that Dean himself did not know how he killed the soldier who interrogated him. This was actually true, because he had not yet fully understood, although his speed and strength had increased. Clenching his fist, the young man felt that his blood was now boiling, as if there was a force that wanted to break out. Still, Dean Eno really wanted to know what was happening to his body, but the girl did not know this and could not answer this question. There was very little chance that the body would mutate on its own. In the Holy Land, the occult arts practiced something like that. The ability to stimulate the potential of the brain, this came from the elders and their religion. With its help they could improve their body. With the exception of this sect, the only one who can use the same abilities are the people from the Red Gloves. There are about 50 of them. Convinced of this, the girl also said that someday Dean Eno would meet these unusual people. Alarmed, the hero exclaimed that he did not know, because he had never heard of it before. Patting the guy on the head, the girl began to calm him down, saying that there was nothing wrong with it, because everyone has their own secrets. Soon she got up and began to walk somewhere, saying that the young man should follow her because she wanted to show him something. Suddenly, the girl's attention was drawn to a man sitting nearby who was drinking coffee. It was very noticeable that this man had an incredibly large amount of excess weight. He drank coffee with a lot of sugar every day. Looking around, the young man noticed that there was probably an acquaintance of the girl nearby, but she only said that she did not want to know him. Walking along the corridor, the hero decided to find out a little about the test, as well as about the invitation to the mysterious organization, because he did not want to be deceived. To this girl, she only replied that she did not force him to go with her, because the field test is a company test for recruiting new employees. Only those who pass it have the right to join the Red Glove. The only way to get to the test was to receive an invitation, in which case the young man wanted to find out what would happen if he said that he did not want to be a killer. Smiling, his girlfriend only said that he obviously wouldn't like the answer in that case. Passing a door, the young man noticed that two strange guys were standing not far from him, and they were wearing unusual masks. As it turned out, these were two gatekeepers, and they never spoke to anyone at all. This did not even surprise the hero, since he had already begun to get used to the strangeness of this place. Opening the huge door, the girl hoped that everything would work out for him, because demons and ghosts are in this room. The place they came to was called Bounty Bar, where the tasks of the Red Gloves were distributed. And in order to receive an invitation, Dean Eno will have to grab a special place here. A huge number of criminals were in this bar, and each of them looked at Ding Eno in surprise, thinking that he looked like an ordinary person. Together they decided to go to the bar to drink something strong. The one-eyed bartender was very glad that the girl came to him. After all, they had not seen each other for a long time. The last time was when she dealt with the Order of Monkeys. The young man still didn't understand what the connection was between the invitation and this place, but as it turned out, there was a huge screen nearby. On this screen was the world kill ranking, which was displayed on the screen. The higher the star level, the more difficult it is, and of course the reward will be much greater. Red Gloves have rules that all orders can be chosen after spawning. There are two ways: killing or forcing a successor to complete the task. After successful completion of the task, people who are not members of the organization receive an invitation. Also, the one-eyed bartender secretly said that agent number 48 had never seen newcomers before. As it turned out, someone nearby had already completed the task and killed someone with a 3-star rating. It was Pharaoh, and the girl ordered him to be killed so that Dean Eno would receive his invitation. The hero was initially surprised by such a task, but understood that he really needed to complete it, because he really wanted to become a killer. Meanwhile, a classmate was shocked by the information that was told to her by the investigators, because they said that Dean Eno was involved in the crime and shot at people. That is why the arriving investigators needed the help of a classmate, because they did not know what was happening to Dean. That's why they needed help. The worried girl herself didn't know what to say, because her classmate never talked about anything. But she was literally sure that he was not a bad person, because she felt it. At the same time, Pharaoh announced that he had finished resting, and it was time for him to go back to work, because time is money. All the mercenaries understood that Pharaoh wanted to quickly get into the top 50 so that he could learn the occult arts, and he also took on a 3-star mission, and no one in this room wanted to challenge him. Looking at his partner, the hero could not understand whether she really wanted him to die or to pass the test. It was not clear what was on these women's minds. Looking at her partner, the girl asked him to stop guessing what she thought about him, and asked Dean to first take care of himself, because the pharaoh was leaving and there was very little time. Thus, the young man decided to hurry up and began to walk through the crowd in order to approach the pharaoh. Smiling joyfully, the boy exclaimed that he needed to receive the mission that the pharaoh had just taken. For an experienced killer, this was indeed an unusual request, and he saw that a newcomer was addressing him, which is why he decided to find out his name. The young man only replied that he was not exactly a beginner, and was with number 48. For the pharaoh this was unusual news, because he saw that his goddess had just raised a glass to him, and he was not worth it, because he was too happy about such an event, and it was necessary to calm down at least a little. At the same time, the partner understood that this guy had gained the advantage, and he was really full of lousy ideas. Watching the pharaoh, the hero saw that he was really nervous, and it seemed that Fun had a really famous personality, which is why he couldn't lose just like that, and had to teach him a lesson. It was because of this that Ding Inu exclaimed that he was the boyfriend of a girl named Fun Ding. This turn of events was simply unacceptable for the lady, and she could not believe that her comrade had said this. For everyone present in this bar, this statement was truly simply shocking, and only the young man was concentrated on his task and blew a kiss to his beloved girl. Pharaoh literally could not believe it, and understood that it was practically impossible. The experienced killer did not understand why Fun Ding should be with this child. If this is true, his will clearly not be weak. Watching the pharaoh, the young man realized that he had been silent for a long time, so he thought that he had done the right thing. The crowd nearby began chanting for the bar to turn off the music and shouting for the pharaoh to beat the kid, because no one here had dared to challenge the pharaoh for a very long time, and everyone thought that today would be something to see. Stretching out his hand, the pharaoh said that the newcomer could attack him first. Without hesitation, the young man began to attack, and understood that their forces could be unequal, and it was necessary to first explore what abilities the pharaoh had. Looking at this boy, Pharaoh only thought that he was not particularly smart, but it was still not clear whether Fun Ding really had a relationship with him. Approaching his opponent, Ding Ino only thought that he had to get as close as possible in order to grab him and throw him. The attack was too predictable, and the enemy used his superpowers to dodge. Using his magical abilities, the pharaoh was easily able to counterattack, and thus Ding Ino was slammed directly into the floor. Experiencing severe pain, the young man still thought about continuing the battle, because he simply could not give up. His rage was much stronger than the enemy thought, and the guy stood up again, after which he continued to attack. The enemy all the time understood exactly how Ding Ino was attacking, which is why he could repel these attacks. The young man was completely weak compared to the strong pharaoh, and even realized it. Each attack was devastating for Ding Ino, and it was extremely difficult for him to resist such a strong opponent. Still, Pharaoh admitted that he was fighting a tough guy, because he was able to get up from the floor and continue the fight. Realizing that it was difficult to continue the battle, the young man began to think that he could again use Fun Ding in order to distract his enemy. Suddenly, he realized that such methods could no longer be used, and remembered how his grandfather once told him that a man should not be soft. And Pharaoh, in turn, was a sissy, and fought like a girl who is not capable of anything. In fact, in childhood, everyone insulted and spread rot on the pharaoh, because he was weak, and everyone considered it their duty to call him trash. The little boy was painted with makeup and beaten because he was considered a sissy, because he was weaker than everyone else. Watching everything that was happening, the bartender concluded that the main character said the worst thing he could ever say, and Fun Ding could not understand why the young man was doing this, because the pharaoh had become serious, but it would be useful for him to see the real power of the Red's gloves. Using his snake henchman, the pharaoh exclaimed that he would now fight seriously and began to act, using his bloody gaze ability. Using this ability, the snake was able to attack the young man and wrapped itself around his neck, which is why he gradually began to suffocate. While the hero was experiencing incredible pain, the pharaoh crept up from behind in order to deliver another attack. Because of the attack, Ding Ino fell onto the bar counter, and realized that his body was no longer listening to him. The girl realized that the pharaoh took the words of the main character seriously, and now she had to somehow get out of this situation, because perhaps this will be the last day in the life of Ding Ino, because of what he said towards the pharaoh. Without hesitation, the hero snatched the glass of wine from the girl, and exclaimed that he could lose to this guy. But still, he needed to take revenge, because this pharaoh looked really very weak, and it was as if he was mocking the young man. After drinking the wine, Ding Ino decided to himself that he would never give up again, and would definitely cope. After which, with all his might, the hero shouted that he would show the pharaoh who the real strongman was here. As it turned out, the wine was really very spicy, and the young man literally had fire coming out of his mouth. Because of this, he began to run from side to side, and asked everyone to give him water so that the sharpness in his mouth would disappear. The pharaoh was even more angry because of this, because he understood that a sharp weapon was hidden under soft lips, and this was a glass of Fun Ding, which meant an indirect kiss, because of which Ding will now be buried, because he crossed the line of what is permitted. Laughing, the young man did not expect that they would tell him that he would die, because in order for him to do this, the pharaoh must stop tickling him. In connection with this statement, the enemy decided to use his most powerful technique, and summoned a snake, which was supposed to paralyze the victim. Thanks to the snake's bite, green lightning began to pass through the protagonist's body, which gradually paralyzed him. Immediately after the paralysis, the pharaoh struck again, and thus wanted to end this battle, because he decided to remain the winner, and not give the newcomer the opportunity to win. This was followed by many more crushing blows that did not give Ding Ino the opportunity to fight further. Everyone present was simply shocked by the pharaoh's skills, and they did not expect that he would be so cruel to the newcomer. After the last blow, Pharaoh decided to order himself a glass of wine, and Fun Din thought this blow was really very cool. The man even blushed from such a compliment, because he liked the girl very much, but he was embarrassed to tell her about it. In the pharaoh's memories, a girl appeared who asked him if he was really being bullied again. As it turned out, it was Fun Din, who did not want to allow anyone to offend the pharaoh, who was not yet a child at that time, and could not give back to anyone. The good-natured girl explained to the pharaoh how he needed to fight, although she could not see the young man for some time. But Fun also really wanted Pharaoh to remember everything she taught him, and then he would never be offended again. At the same time, the main character continued to lie behind the bar counter, and was still unconscious. Experiencing severe pain, the boy gradually began to come to his senses, but it was still difficult for him to get up. Fun Ding watched the pharaoh closely, and did not understand why he turned red like a tomato, as if he had something else on his mind. Still, the guy decided to ask the girl who this guy was who dared to challenge him. Seeing that they were not answering him, the guy asked again, who was this stranger who was attacking him? Looking at the boy, Fun Ding exclaimed that she was also interested in him, and she was collaborating with him. Those present did not understand how this was possible, because they thought that Fun Din had brought a strong man. After all, she knew the pharaoh, but she still allowed the newcomer to throw him a dried one. She must know something interesting. Some of the spectators even started placing bets. One man decided to bet 100,000 red coins that the brat would win. At that same second, the hero gradually began to get up and exclaimed that this fight was really not bad. It was at this moment that he felt a power that overwhelmed him, and he could use it to defeat his enemy. Jumping out from behind the bar, the boy began to act and wanted to continue the battle. After all, now he was more determined and wanted to beat the pharaoh so that he would not be so impudent. Laughing, Pharaoh exclaimed that the guy was already sick of him, and if Fun Ding objected, he would kill this newcomer. Feeling indifferent, the girl only said that Pharaoh can do what he wants. These words made the pharaoh extremely happy, and he immediately rushed into battle in order to finish off the newcomer. The battle began, and the enemy was already very close. Trying to strike, he began to swing his fist right at the hero's head. Thanks to his new abilities, Dean Eno could now see every blow of his enemy, and was able to easily dodge the attack. Thus, thanks to his skills, Pharaoh was never able to hit the young man, and missed all the time. Thanks to the pharaoh, the young man now became much stronger, and he could repel such a strong and experienced opponent. Dean Eno made his first blow, and delivered it directly to the head of the scoundrel, who dared to attack again. For the girl, this sight was truly pleasant, and she watched this battle with pleasure. But the others present were shocked by the skills of the protagonist, because they did not understand how this was possible. Only Pharaoh exclaimed that this was really funny, because he was not hurt at all by the blow. Trembling as he resisted the blow, Pharaoh exclaimed that he did not expect the newcomer to have such strength. At the same time, not far from the police station, investigators said that they had some leads on a possible suspect. It was a woman with red hair and a specific mask, which is why they were going to check all entries and exits from the city strictly in full. Also, the investigators did not think that the protagonist's classmate treated the killer, which means that everything was in vain, but in any case, they could use the girl later. The man understood that Pashan was already dead. The weapon that they could use against the group of blue caves lay in the coffin. But his organization still has a lot of strength and power. Now everything is under the leadership of his wife Jiangming, and the 3 tigers from the Black Army. Even though they didn't have a clear leader at the moment, it was still interesting what they planned to do next. Suddenly, an idea came to the girl's mind, and she thought that it was possible to take advantage of Jiangming and her army. And as for the killer girl, if she is one of the Red Gloves, then in order to start an investigation they needed evidence. As it turned out, the Red Gloves are the servants of the Blue Caves, because together they gather the best to kill in the whole world. If the girl took Ding Eno with her to their lair, then it will be impossible to track them. Some time later, events continued to happen in the Red Glove Bar, where the pharaoh was happy that the main character had become like the enemy. Suddenly, the snake spat out some kind of card. It turned out to be a task card, and all the information was on it. Laughing, the enemy exclaimed that the hero would have to try to take this card, and then he would win the battle. Immediately after this, with deft movements, the pharaoh began to dodge, and he did it so quickly that it was simply impossible to track exactly how he was moving. After a small amount of dodging, the opponent began to make multiple attacks, and shouted that he had met different people, but never like him, because Dean Eno is the one who needs to be beaten in order for him to become stronger. The young man was simply shocked by the flurry of blows, because he did not understand how to dodge, because the enemy's hands struck very quickly, like whips. Deciding to think over a battle plan, the guy began to retreat, and did it with a backflip. The enemy smiled and realized that the young man had noticed that he was using the dance of fangs in this battle. Due to the force of the blows, Ding Eno's hands literally began to burn with pain, and he did not understand what to do, because such a wound could not be repaired quickly. Trying to calm down, the guy began to think that there should be a chance to defeat the scoundrel, even though he is so strong. Even the one-eyed bartender couldn't understand what this guy was doing and why he kept fighting. Realizing that he couldn't stop, Dean began to think that he already had little time, and he could only rely on brute force. Taking off his shirt, he began to wrap his hands in order to protect his wounds, and the enemy would not have the opportunity to hit the wounds. Only if Dean manages to get closer can he defeat the villain and end the fight. Unfortunately, the blow was carried out too slowly, and the pharaoh was able to easily dodge it, because he had greater agility than the main character. At that same second, the young man began to choke and continued to hold on to his neck, not understanding what was happening to him. The hero also began to see double, and he realized that something had happened to his eyes, and he could no longer see normally. The pharaoh only exclaimed to this that this was truly an incredible battle, because he thought that they would still play, and the faster the newcomer moves, the faster the poison will reach his heart. Looking at Fun Din, the pharaoh decided to ask if he could end this battle by finishing off the main character. Laughing, the girl indicated with her hand that he could really finish the battle and destroy the guy. This was indeed good news for the enemy, and he realized that the time had come to act. Using his strongest blow, he shouted that it was about to touch death. From such a strong blow, the young man's soul seemed to leave his body, and it seemed that he would never be able to fight again, because he would now lose his life. The guy had hallucinations, and it seemed to him that he was falling somewhere into an abyss, and around him there was only fire. An unknown entity told him to give her a minute of his time, because he had lost again. Having accepted defeat, Dean Eno only said that his opponent was stronger than him, but yacked his movement, and he did not know what to do. The entity didn't like this, and she didn't understand how someone could just take it and give it up, as if he had forgotten about his offense. Experiencing rage, the guy began to shout that he would never forget about his offense, and wanted to take revenge, but it was already over. Suddenly, Dean Eno came to life and shouted that the game was just beginning and it was time for him to act. The entity inside him wanted to show what he was capable of, and what kind of power was in his body. The crowd of people around rejoiced, and no one could understand whether the battle would continue, because it seemed that the pharaoh had finished off the newcomer. According to the enemy, it was all over, and he ordered the hero to surrender, because there was no longer a chance of victory. The unknown creature inside the guy continued to say that this was not the end of the battle. Pharaoh was surprised at this turn of events, because he did not understand how the guy could continue to talk. Shortly after this, one simple blow was performed that could easily cause pain to the opponent. Only from this blow did the scoundrel fly several tens of meters to the side, which forced the crowd of people to disperse. There were people standing nearby who were extremely surprised that the poison had no effect on the newcomer, although previously it had been fatal to everyone. For the pharaoh, this was truly an impressive surprise, and he did not understand how this was even possible, because the enemy in front of him actually became stronger during the battle. Rising from the floor, the pharaoh shouted that he wanted Din Eno to show him his true limit, and reveal all his power. The second step of the battle was the fetters with which the enemy had to stop. The stunned scoundrel could not believe that they could stop him, and he did not understand how to continue the battle. From powerlessness, Pharaoh could not even move his hand, because it was entangled with the hand of the protagonist. The next step was to deliver a powerful blow in order to knock your opponent down. This blow really had an effect, because in this way Pharaoh ended up on the floor, and from the force of the fall he pierced the floor, leaving a huge dent on it. Everyone present now realized that the newcomer was like a completely different person, because he had broken the ground with his opponent. The frightened Pharaoh decided to find out where the young man got such strength from, and who he even was. The hero decided not to respond to this, and was preparing to complete the last blow in order to end this battle. Feeling great fear, Pharaoh tried to block in order to avoid the final blow. Having gathered all his strength, the hero took the third step of this battle, namely, he used a blow called the Iron Mountain. Such a strong blow was a push with your whole body, due to which the force of the blow was much higher than usual. The spectators were delighted by such an impressive battle, and they continued to watch everything that was happening with pleasure. Suddenly, after the blow was made, a strange steam appeared, which gradually began to evaporate. The youth seemed to be exhausted, and gradually began to fall to the floor, because he could no longer fight. Seeing this, Pharaoh was simply shocked, because he did not understand how the enemy lost consciousness. Not understanding what was happening, everyone present simply watched as Dean Eno lost consciousness. The enemy only at that moment tried to understand why his opponent stopped his blow and did not complete the battle. The spectator, who bet 100,000 red coins, exclaimed that this battle was really worth the cost. After thinking for a while, the bartender decided to ask Fun Ding something. Namely, the man decided to find out if the girl could withstand Ding Eno in battle. Because of such a question, the girl only laughed, because she thought that the newcomer was still weak, and he would not be able to compete with her. As it turned out, for the bartender, these movements awakened not very good memories. After all, these movements meant that the guy used the 8 extremes of boxing, which was indeed a very rare technique. Fun Din exclaimed that she had to go, after which she began to calm all the people down, saying that they should return to their places. All this time, the mysterious man was watching everything that was happening, sitting on his chair and drinking hot coffee. Suddenly, the main character had memories when he was still little, he was far in the forest, and was hunting. The smart guy preferred to hunt wild boars, and did it unnoticed, hiding in the trees. With just one well-aimed shot, the young man was easily able to defeat a huge boar. This really made the kid, who was only 12 years old, happy, because this was one of the first animals that he was able to kill while hunting. The joyful guy began to run up to the boar in order to check if he was alive. But as it turned out, the boar was really alive, and he immediately rushed at the young man in order to attack. Because of this, the little hero was very scared, but fortunately, someone still saved him, because he shot the boar. As it turned out, it was his grandfather who was able to save his grandson because he cared about him very much. The elderly man asked the young man not to treat hunting as a game, because it is a battle between life and death. And if you don't kill the victim with one shot, then no one else besides Grandpa will be able to cover Ding Eno in the future. This mysterious entity was from a huge fire that burned the entire forest, and fury burned the truth. The remnants of the tribe gave birth to spears of vengeance, and cracks appeared on the walls of religion. No one really understood who Dean Eno really was. When the kings with the sword could not drink the blood from the bodies and hearts, then the blood of the kings will be drunk to the drop. Every king must get what he deserves. After all, if the king could not defeat his victim, then the victim will defeat him. In this regard, the entity understood that the guy did not have much time left. At the same time, Fun Ding noticed that the newcomer had woken up and decided to ask if he had nightmares. And she asked this because the guy had previously talked in his sleep. The girl was surprised by this turn of events, because she did not expect the hero to wake up so soon. After sleeping, Fun Ding could observe that Ding Inua became somewhat agitated and did not behave as usual. All this time, the hero continued to ignore the girl, and she did not understand why he was doing this. The worried girl nevertheless decided to follow the guy to understand why he left the room. In fact, she followed the hero in order to help him, because she saw that he was very weak. The hero was against such help, because he wanted to do everything himself, and did not want to feel so helpless. Meanwhile, events continued to occur at Pashan's residence. The investigators decided to drive up to the residence in order to understand whether Jiang Ming could help them. The guards began to apologize to the officers because Madam had a lot of family matters and was too tired to meet them, so they asked them to come back tomorrow. Taking out her ID, the girl exclaimed that, according to Article 92 of the federal law, the police have the right to visit and collect evidence in the case at any time. The less angry man exclaimed that they were here on a very important matter, which required them to proceed inside. Nevertheless, the investigator decided to pass on a certain note that needed to be given to Jiang Ming. The alarmed servant began to sweat from anxiety, but still agreed to give the note to Madam. The next day, Fun Ding decided to tell the guy that they had a ticket for the sick Bova, which would be the day after tomorrow. The pharaoh's target was in the city of Dak, and Ding Yino would have to kill Hawken before he did. Thus, they needed to end their rivalry with the pharaoh by killing his target. As if nothing had happened, the girl decided to throw a t-shirt at the hero, saying that it would suit him. The guy didn't like this behavior, and he threw it right in Fun Ding's face and ordered her to stop with it. After all, the young man understood that his partners were having a lot of fun playing with his life, and he was not going to go anywhere, so now Fun Ding could kill him right here. Unexpectedly, the girl grabbed the main character and covered his mouth, saying that he should not risk his already weak health. After all, trick or request, but killers must survive by any means. Having gained the upper hand, the young man began to say that he did not consider Fun Din to be his coach, because she had previously been unable to help him. This just made the girl laugh, and she just lay on the bed and smiled. But still she could not stand such an insult, and hit the young man with all her strength, because of which he began to experience incredible pain. Blowing a kiss, Fun Ding exclaimed that she would be waiting for the guy in the banquet hall, and he should dress up a little, and also stop crying, because he looks like a beggar. Events continued to occur at Pashan's residence, where investigators tried to get inside the building. The madam who owns the residence still decided that the investigators could go inside, but the guards immediately ordered them that even though they were police, they still had to hand over their weapons. This technique did not affect the girl in any way, because she knew that only the police superintendent has the right to collect weapons. Extending his hand, the guard tried to stop the girl, because he did not like the way she answered. The man immediately grabbed the impudent guard, and exclaimed that he was lucky that he had not touched his partner, otherwise the number of his hands would have instantly decreased. The guards immediately became alarmed and began to call for reinforcements so that help could arrive in a difficult situation. The policeman told the guard that with the lady it was necessary to be gentle and not make such sudden movements. Still, it turned out to the man that he had gone too far, because now the guard was lying on the floor, and it was extremely difficult for him to breathe. Continuing to worry, the butler exclaimed that the guests' weapons should remain under their protection, because this rule applies to all Pashan residences. In fact, the man was confident that they would not threaten Miss Jiang Ming, but it was still necessary to hand over the weapons. The kind investigator handed over his pistol and also advised that they needed to change this rule for special cases. Having handed over their weapons, the butlers invited them inside and said that they would take this request into consideration. At the same time, events continued to happen in the restaurant, where the main character was sitting with Fun Ding. The girl decided to place an order in order to have a snack, and at the same time the hero looked around. The young man still did not understand whether the killers really looked like that, because there were ordinary people around them. In fact, there are not only murderers in this building, anyone could rent a room in this hotel and have a good time here. But in that case, Dean Eno was surprised. How could there be a Red Glove bar here? And he asked if they were afraid that they might be discovered, but as it turns out, without cards, ordinary people can only see what they want it supposed to. In the eyes of ordinary people, it was just a 5-star hotel that was not anything special. Hearing this, the guy began to understand that this is how killers also like to run a side business. But this was not so. Everything here belonged to the Blue Caves organization, even this building, including the Red Gloves. Because of this, the hero immediately began to think that the most powerful organizations in the world are organizations of assassins. This makes sense. The rich and powerful should maintain control over everything around them. Approaching the hero, the waiter accidentally spilled a glass of drink on him. The careless man immediately began to apologize to the main character and say that he really was careless. Following the hero, Fun Ding only exclaimed that he needed to quickly return from the toilet, otherwise he would be left without food. As soon as the hero entered the toilet, the spirit of ape appeared in front of him, and this was truly unexpected, because of which the young man was afraid. The monkey only apologized for frightening the guy and said that he just wanted to talk to him. After giving the letter to Jiang Ming, a strange man who acted as an intermediary also came to her and asked the girl not to ask about this letter. The mysterious stranger only knew how to kill, and his goal was only murder. In this case, Jiang Ming wanted to know who he would kill, and for whom. As it turned out, the man would kill those who would interfere with his master. This news was indeed not bad for the girl, but she understood that now the man's owner was dead. That is why the stranger came to see Jiang Ming, because she is currently his new owner. A few hours later, investigators came to the wife of the deceased Pashan and began to interrogate her. Still, the missus wanted to know what exactly the police wanted from her, which is why she immediately asked about it. As it turned out, the police came here to find out everything about the death of her husband. Meanwhile, events continued to occur on one of the Red Glove floors. Pharaoh was very pleased when he saw a message from Fun Din, who wrote that everything was going according to plan. Approaching the table in the restaurant, the young man was surprised that all the plates were empty, as if many people had eaten absolutely all the dishes. As it turned out, the lady had left and the waiter decided to give notice. The excited man also said that before leaving, the guest ate absolutely everything that was on this table. After the interrogation, the police began to leave the residence. But still, they didn't quite understand what Jiang Ming meant when she told them about her husband's death. The only thing they understood was that sooner or later they would find out the truth. In fact, on the piece of paper that investigators had previously given, it was stated that it was very difficult to find red-gloved people. At the same time, Pharaoh came to some office, where his guards stood nearby and guarded the entrance. The man was extremely surprised, because he did not understand whether it was really true that the white glove existed. The mysterious stranger who was sitting on the chair exclaimed that since Pharaoh had heard about them, then he needed to know something else. The stranger turned out to be Andy Tolstopas, who said that the white gloves were the performers of the red gloves, and the pharaoh had power that he should not have. As soon as Andy said this, the pharaoh's snake immediately seemed to go berserk and began to go on a rampage. One of the strongest warriors could not understand what was happening here and why the snake began to strangle him, but as it turned out, only 50 red glove killers had achieved the occult art of the Holy Lands, and the one who steals for the forbidden fruit must be punished. Snapping his fingers, Andy Fatpaw exclaimed that he would still give the pharaoh a chance. Because his snake will take good care of the arrogant guy for Andy Fatbelly, no matter what tricks he uses, the bomb inside the snake will kill him. And his goddess with red hair looks like an old friend with whom they have known for a very long time, which is why it is necessary to keep an eye on her. Meanwhile, at the airport, passengers flying to the city of Mingchu should pay attention to their flight. The main character's friends discussed that it was a great decision when their classmate decided to go to study as an exchange student, and after she arrived, she needed to have a good rest before classes. These tips really made the girl happy, and she agreed with her friends. Caring comrades knew that it was not so easy to live alone in an unfamiliar city, which is why they asked to call the girl if something happened. The girl's plane had already arrived, and she needed to fly away, which is why she decided to say goodbye to her comrades. While flying away on the plane, the classmate was only thinking about where exactly Dean Eno had gone. And at the same time the young man was sailing on a ship, and watched the beautiful view of the sea. Coming closer to the guy, Fun Ding decided to joke with him, saying that they were almost there, and he still had time to jump into the sea. Having laughed at such a joke, the young man replied that his partner should be careful, because he could throw her overboard too. While drinking a cocktail, the hero was only thinking about whether his victim named Hawken could really be an ordinary doctor. Because this doctor was given a 3-star mission, as well as a large number of awards. But the partner did not see the catch in this, and was very happy that this would really be a good and easy mission. At the same time, events continued to occur in the hospital where Kurogi was lying. Suddenly, the man woke up and saw a doctor standing not far from him. As soon as the experienced military man woke up, a strong blow was immediately heard, and the guards on the outskirts were surprised by this. Having gone inside, the alarmed police decided to find out what happened and where the prisoner was. As it turned out, he attacked the doctor and escaped through the ventilation. The ventilation hatch was indeed open, which meant that the criminal was currently in the ventilation of the hospital. Although the military understood that the criminal was seriously wounded, which is why he would not be able to go far, it was still necessary to report this incident to headquarters. Kuroga's guards immediately called the investigators who were investigating this case, and the girl was simply furious, because she did not understand what the hell was going on there. The wounded soldier, with the last of his strength, said that Kurogi had escaped, and all the police who were in the hospital were dead. These were the last words of the soldier, because despite the fact that he was able to call the headquarters, help did not arrive on time, which is why they could not cope with Kurogi. Some time later, events continued to occur in the city of Dak. The taxi driver told the main character and the girl that rich people like to relax here because there are a lot of very interesting entertainments. Looking at the couple, the man also exclaimed that he knew why they came here. Laughing, the taxi driver also exclaimed that thanks to passengers like them, he has such a luxurious car. However, the man still said that he would be polite to tourists and asked for 120 yuan as payment. A few minutes later, the young man and his partner checked into the hotel, and he watched the city from the balcony. Looking at everything that was happening, the guy saw that the smell of crime was hanging over the entire city. Unable to bear it, Fun Ding hit his partner, saying that he shouldn't be so serious because it's just dirty air. Shortly after this, she began to pull the boy away. They say that the first step to killing is to explore the area. Suddenly, someone started knocking on the door with all their might, as if they really wanted to get into the room. As it turned out, behind the door was just a giant courier who saw a hot girl with red hair. In fact, this was not a murderer, and not a person who attempted on the lives of the main character and the girl, but just an ordinary parcel delivery man. These suitcases contained magical gadgets with the help of which Fun Ding and Ding Yino would be able to continue their activities. The girl decided to give one of the cases to her partner and said that the password for it was 2333. The hero immediately decided that it was necessary to open the case and familiarize himself with the contents. As it turned out, this suitcase contained a pistol, a knife, and many other mysterious objects. For the young man, this was truly amazing technology, because he had never seen anything like this before. Suddenly, from a strange device, someone began to say that a beginner should not be surprised, although the stranger really creates things that surprise absolutely everyone. Laughing, Dean Eno took out his watch and wanted to find out who was talking to him through it. As it turned out, this stranger could instantly take all his assets and personal data, and also force him to sell his body for the rest of his life, so he should have been shown a little respect during the conversation. While examining the weapon, the girl also said that you should be careful with it, because these devices are really strong. Their assistant nevertheless decided that it was necessary to return to the matter, and said that he was monitoring all the information about Hawken. This doctor was really very strange, so he asked the team to be more careful, because anything could be expected from this doctor. Examining the technology, the young man assumed that the word strange meant that his partner did not know everything about him. As it turned out, it was very difficult for their assistant to work because he was a little hungry, and this prevented him from working. Unexpectedly, the young man saw that this doctor works in an organization that sells organs and uses hospitals to obtain organs and sell them. Armed with pistols, Fun Ding exclaimed that they had to go because the killing game had officially begun. The smart partner began using the drone to investigate the area where their target was located. According to the instructions, the building contained red zones that were covered with special materials. Thus, it was necessary to enter this building and check, but Fun Ding also warned that one should be careful because many assassins had failed in this mission. The hero was extremely surprised by this turn of events, because he thought that his partner would go with him, but she did not do this, because the newcomer needs to do all the dirty work, and she is now on vacation. Blowing a kiss, the girl exclaimed that he would succeed, even though he was a cowardly boy. Some time later, the hero decided to enter the room, and at first glance it looked like an ordinary hospital, so it was not clear where to start. Looking at one of the workers, Dean immediately understood what he needed to do in this situation. Sneaking into the back room, he disguised himself as a janitor, and thought about the fact that he did not expect that one day he would behave like a spy. Walking through the corridors of the hospital, the young man continued to explore the area. Entering the elevator, he immediately saw that the elevator itself led to the same B2 and B4, but the required floor was not there. He decided to take the elevator up to one of the floors, but noticed that the right place was nowhere to be found. Still, it was necessary to continue to act, which is why he decided that it was worth walking along one of the floors in order to explore the area. Without hesitation, the hero entered one of the offices and began to look around to find clues. I continue to walk forward. He kept thinking that the elevator should be inside this office. But unfortunately, this elevator was locked, and not far from it there was a Scott lock with a password, which required a key card to unlock. Meanwhile, the cube security guard saw that a janitor was wandering behind the forbidden door, which is why he called security there. One of the guards reacted instantly and then headed to the right office. The hero was surprised by this turn of events, and understood that the surveillance group reacted quite quickly, because he had only just approached the door and had already attracted their attention. The evil guard began to address the janitor and decided to ask what he forgot here. The alarmed guy said that he was responsible for sanitation on floor B1, and this door was dirty, and he wanted to wash it. The man instantly insulted the cleaner and said that it was forbidden to wash this door, which is why the guy needed to get out of here. Realizing that this didn't work, Dean Eno began to think that he needed to come up with something else. Meanwhile, events continued to take place in one abandoned building, where the pharaoh could not understand why they could not meet in some luxurious place. As it turned out, Fun Ding decided to meet here, only because this is how they do it in the movies. The killers have a conversation in a place like this. Although this did not make Pharaoh very happy, he understood that this was indeed a truthful answer. Earlier, the girl's assistant gave her the opportunity to use the task card, and for her this was really an advantage, because everything was written in this card in great detail. The worried Pharaoh still wanted to understand why Fun Ding gave this guy a wonderful gadget, because the task card no longer matters in this case, and he wanted to understand why there was a need to involve this kid. In fact, the girl understood that in this way she could ensure double security. The point was that even if Dean Eno failed the mission and did not receive the task card, he could still get it by killing the opponent's target. At the same time, the girl received a new message, to which she was going to respond, and Pharaoh became embarrassed, because he was very jealous of the main character. Ding Yino decided to call the girl and ask where she was. Without hesitation Fun Ding answered that she was on a date. The hero still realized that he could not do anything at the Hawken hospital during the day, which is why he was going to try to do something tonight. The guy also needed additional equipment, which is why he wanted to go to the fat man to get help from him. And to prevent the young man from running away, the girl used a stun gun on him to show him that there was no point in running. Thanks to technology, Fun Din had her own security measures, with the help of which she could enable the main character to stay with her until the end. While Ding Ingguo was passed out, Fun Ding stuck this toy into his body. It was an 80,000-volt tracking sensor. If the young man seemed suspicious to her, she would shock him at any time. This began to anger the guy even more, and he asked the girl if she really thought that he would be afraid of her. The partner nevertheless decided to tell him that she brought him to the House of Red Gloves, and here she is his mentor, and if he is not able to complete this task, he will be eliminated. These rules were unbreakable, and the hero decided for himself that he should change his mentor. After disconnecting the call, the girl began to think that she had probably been very cold to her partner during this conversation. The pharaoh became very angry when he saw exactly how the newcomer communicated with Fun Din. The man really wanted the girl he liked to finish off this guy, and he himself could eliminate Hawken. Suddenly, the lady decided to give the card so that the pharaoh could look at the profile of his people. In this profile, since he was hunted by the Red Gloves, dozens of his bodyguards have been replaced, which means that a ton of bodyguards have been killed in all this time. In this case, the pharaoh could not understand why Hawken survived every time in this situation. It turned out that the secret is that there is a guy named by Pekhen. This bodyguard killed everyone who was sent to kill Hawken within a year, which is very interesting, because it was this guard who always survived. Thus, it was known that this guard was a martial artist. In order to show what this by Pekhen looks like, Fun Ding decided to open his file. The determined girl wanted to meet him tonight in order to get to know him better. Pharaoh also said that he was asked to hand over a case that contained something very secret. The girl's devoted fan also exclaimed, "No matter what happens in this situation, he will always protect Fun Ding, even at the cost of his life." This was indeed good news for the lady, and she reciprocated, telling him that he should be careful. In fact, she was more interested in the case that was nearby, because it was supposed to contain a brand new weapon. Opening the case, the girl discovered that it contained new biomechanical arms. Such a find even upset Fun Ding a little, because she understood that she was almost accustomed to her old hands. But in order to modernize your body, it was necessary to remove the old mechanical arms. After the hands were removed, it was clear that the girl's real hands were badly damaged. Looking at her old hands, the girl understood that she needed to sacrifice something in order to get something new. She continued to study the new mechanical arms with interest and tried to put them on. As soon as the hands were put on, Fun Ding began to experience incredible pain, and her body seemed to be under the influence of electricity. Merging with new mechanical arms brought incredible pain, and she was extremely difficult to endure. In any case, thanks to her new arms, Fun became much stronger, and could break through a concrete wall with her bare hands. As soon as the pain passed, the girl began to remember what had happened to her earlier, and these memories brought incredible pain that could not be forgotten. The events took place in a building that looked like a church, where many people stood directly above the girl, waiting for something. A mysterious man in armor approached the girl and began to say that after the Lord leaves his mark on her, she will become one of the saints. With the seal of the Lord on her body, she no longer has to be human, because thanks to the seal, an ordinary person becomes a saint. The girl will have to fight the cruel world along with thousands of members of the Sanctuary Alliance. Thanks to the ceremony, Fun Din possessed this seal and was one of the saints. Meanwhile, events continued to occur near the building where Hawken was located. The determined young man was in a garbage truck and suddenly jumped into the bushes to remain unnoticed. While in the bushes, all he could think about was that he was the first killer to wear a wetsuit instead of a shirt. As soon as the camera turned away from the place where the main character was located, quickly running away, the guy immediately began to move further in order to remain unnoticed. Not far from the scene of events there was also a van into which strange boxes were loaded. The men discussed among themselves that this time they would earn a lot of money, but they understood that all the money could go to the boss, and they could pass it by. One of the interlocutors had a plan in which they could not screw up, because if they did, they would not get the money. Suddenly, one of the men saw two silhouettes approaching, and he immediately realized that there were two people nearby. As it turned out, it was Pharaoh along with Fun Din. For them the task map was really useful, because even the bells and whistles could not find the secret entrance. The men were not happy with such guests and decided to stop them by pointing a gun at two strangers. After all, the mercenaries were going to capture two strangers and take them to the doctor in order to get some money. At the same time, events continued to take place in the hospital, where the main character had already begun to move towards the desired goal. With all his might, he slammed the hospital bed right into the door in order to get inside the elevator. The young man also did not forget to wave at the camera in order to be noticed, and security made his way into the room. The hero only told the patients from the hospital that they should close the door and hide, because now it will be very hot in this hospital. Not far from the security office there were many oxygen cylinders, but the men did not notice this, because they were trying to run towards the infiltrating criminal. Watching the guards, Dean Eno decided to greet them and pointed the gun directly at the oxygen tanks to shoot him. Thanks to an accurate shot, an incredibly strong explosion occurred, which occurred due to oxygen cylinders. Approaching the largest guard, the hero only said that he had previously said that he would return here again. With the help of the explosion, the young man was easily able to get into the elevator, because he wanted to go up to another floor. But as it turned out, there were only two buttons in the elevator, with floors B1 and B2. Dean simply didn't understand why there were only two buttons in the elevator, because now he was on floor B1. If he stayed here any longer, he would be turned into human mincemeat. The alarm was already on the second floor, and all the guards began to move in order to get rid of the intruder. The guy had already prepared for this outcome of events, but he understood that if he had known that everything would turn out this way, he would definitely have taken more weapons with him, but alas, he forgot about it. In any case, there was no need to be nervous, because all you had to do was get out of a bad situation. As soon as the elevator door opened, the guards immediately started shooting at it, because they were trying to finish off the intruder right in the elevator. At that same second, some strange jars began to fly out of the elevator, and the security immediately could not understand what they were. These jars were flash noise grenades, with the help of which the young man was easily able to distract a large number of his opponents. All the guards were stunned and also blinded, making them easy to attack. Meanwhile, events continued to occur not far from the secret entrance. Pharaoh decided to find out from Fun Ding how her friend was doing. As it turned out, if the video surveillance system was not glitchy, then she could tell that he was holding up well, and was able to break through the encirclement with using flash grenades. Thanks to his dexterity and skill, the young man was able to get through a huge number of guards without a single scratch. There were so many opponents in this building that he was already sweating, but nothing could be done, because it was either him or him. Looking around, the boy saw something very surprising, which he could not have expected. After all, this room turned out to be a laboratory where there were a large number of people in strange flasks. Coming closer, the hero could not understand whether these were all organ transplant test subjects. Looking at the inscription nearby, he immediately realized that there were still living people in these flasks. Because of this, Dean couldn't understand what exactly Hawken was going to do with these people. Suddenly, some sounds were heard nearby, which is why the hero was immediately ready. Taking out his pistol, he pointed it in the direction from which the sounds were heard, and ordered the one hiding behind the wall to come out. As it turned out, these were just doctors who asked not to shoot at them, because they were not guilty of anything. At first glance, these were indeed doctors who raised their hands and pretended that they were not involved in everything that was happening. Nearby, near one of the doctors, there was a guard who was ready to attack. Without hesitation, the villain knocked the pistol out of the hands of the protagonist, which greatly frightened him, because the young man clearly did not expect such a turn of events. All the medics also began to attack, and Dean Yino couldn't believe his eyes, because he never thought that the medics would fight him. At the same time, Pharaoh was surprised that Hawken turned out to be more terrible than he thought, because in a year he killed fewer people than this doctor in a day. And all this was only for the sake of the same thing, namely, for the sake of profit. The lady decided to call a train in order to travel further. Still, the guy believed that not everyone does something for profit, at least not them. As it turned out, the pharaoh is actually still trying to repay his debt to the girl, but she is completely different, and saved him in order to use him. Fun Ding never intended to lie to anyone, especially the pharaoh, because he knew her past. Meanwhile, the main character's fight continued, and he had already destroyed the first doctor. The second target turned out to be a girl, and she also fought skillfully, using a scalpel. Only one doctor was afraid of everything that happened in this room, and repeated the same thing, that he did not want to die. The alarmed man shouted that he had not done anything and was simply an assistant. He also talked about how he could be useful and could help, but only asked Dean Eno not to kill him. After listening to the doctor, the young man still decided to take pity on him and not kill him, because he was the last one left and was the most cowardly. On another floor, the guard was already reporting to Mr. Hawken that they had discovered several intruders in the B1 and B corridors, as well as the B3 tunnels. All security has been completely cleared, but they know nothing about zones B2 and B4, because there are no surveillance cameras there. The concerned guard still wanted to know what to do, because the intruder in the B3 tunnel was using a vehicle and they were now quite close. There was still only one way out of this situation, and the doctor understood that Mr. Bai could take care of all this. And it really was so, because one of the strongest warriors remained who had been guarding Dr. Hawken all the time. The smart mercenary exclaimed that it was necessary to turn off the elevator from B2 to B1, and in the meantime it would go to area B3. One of the surviving doctors, meanwhile, began to provide treatment and began searching for the necessary drug. The wounded hero noticed that the doctor was taking out some strange thing and decided to ask what it was. Feeling very afraid, the doctor said that this is a cool thing, and it was completely developed by Mr. Hawken. It can stimulate human potential in a short time. I understand that this could be a trap. The guy first asked the doctor to inject the drug into himself to understand whether it really has such an effect. Immediately the man did not want to do this, because he understood that this could be dangerous for his life. In pain, Dean began to threaten the doctor, saying that he had to make a choice, a bullet or this thing. The doctor made his choice and began to inject an experimental drug that increases the potential for strength in a person. This thing really worked on the man, and he felt that he really had much more strength. Looking at his hand, the man was no longer worried, because he understood that he was full of strength. The smart guy asked the doctor not to look at him, so, even if he becomes Superman, Dean will still be able to finish him off. Thus, the young man nevertheless agreed to have the medicine injected into his body. The pain was simply unbearable, and Dean Eno had incredible difficulty in not to scream. As it turned out, one patient can be injected with a maximum of 5 milligrams, and the doctor injected the main character with 200 milligrams of the drug. Moreover, the drug is unstable, so the guy was supposed to die soon. But in fact, the young man felt very strange, but the doctor was right, because the medicine worked. After which it was necessary to patch up the protagonist's wounds, and the doctor got to work. The alarmed man did not understand how this was possible, because countless experiments had failed, but this guy survived. Looking at the man in front of him, the doctor knew that according to Professor Hawkins' theory, the patient's body was about to mutate, and thus a monster was created. Continuing to tremble with fear, the doctor healed the wounds of his patient, who was with a pistol all the time and menacingly watched the man's every action. The concerned doctor said that early on his patient's arm was minor, but the wounds throughout the body were very serious, and if he did not begin to treat them in time, death could occur. The hero nevertheless decided to leave, saying that he did not have time for this now. Turning to the doctor, the boy also said that he still would not kill the doctor who helped him. Coming closer to the elevator, Dean Yino could not understand what was going on, because for some reason there was no way to call the elevator. As it turned out, this was due to the fact that the elevator call mechanism was broken. Because of this, the young man immediately began to get angry, because he did not understand why the mercenaries shot at the elevator, and thereby broke the mechanism. Because these scoundrels would not be able to get out of here, due to the fact that they would not be able to climb to the exit. Since the young man had explosives in his backpack, he understood that he first needed to think things through carefully. It was also extremely strange that Hawken had not yet sent any people to this floor, and there were two more options. First, he does not know the whole situation, since there are no cameras here, so he will not act boldly. This means that the closer the hero is to Hawken, the stronger the enemy will be, so the elite will stand next to the target. Or there was another possibility that Area B3 was also attacked, and perhaps it was the pharaoh. At the same time, Fun Din and the pharaoh were heading through the tunnels to the entrance to the sector where Hawken was located. As soon as the team arrived in Sector B3, a large number of soldiers were immediately waiting for them, all of them armed. Clever killers watched the personnel who stood with weapons, because they needed to come up with a good plan. One of the mercenaries showed a certain hand gesture that signaled an attack. Due to the fact that the signal for the attack was given, all the soldiers began to shoot at the train car in order to hit the targets that dared to sneak into the sector. But in fact, Fun Ding was already right on top of the train, and began to gradually kill the mercenaries, catching them by surprise. Some of the mercenaries literally begged not to be killed, because they believed that they were not involved in the attack on the uninvited guests. Unfortunately, the killer girl didn't care at all about this, and she was easily able to finish off the last soldier. The pharaoh was really impressed that the main character was able to get to Area B2, which is why he wanted to know Fun Ting if she trained him, but the girl only replied that it was their little secret. Meanwhile, the young man was on guard, and thought that at any moment mercenaries could enter the laboratory in order to fight him. The brave warrior continued to hold his pistol in order to be on guard. After a few minutes of waiting, the guy was still very tired, and realized that he had already been in this room for a very long time, but they never began to act, and now it was his turn. Turning to the surviving doctor, Dean decided to call him in order to open the door. With a trembling hand, the doctor gradually began to enter the code in order to open the door. The main character kept telling the lab worker to enter the code as soon as possible in order to move forward. Thus, the code was entered and the door gradually began to open. What was behind the door amazed the young man extremely, and he could not believe his eyes. The doctor immediately fell to his knees and began to make excuses, saying that Hawken forced them to do all this. The scoundrel literally begged not to be killed, but the young man didn't care, and he shot at the culprit. Because in the other room there were a large number of girls who were held hostage. These girls were still just children who were imprisoned in this room and experiments were carried out on them. Raising his pistol, the hero began to say that they should not be afraid, because he could get the hostages out of here. In order to make the speech sound more convincing, the hero still realized that it was better to put the gun away. One of the girls decided to turn to the stranger and asked him if he had come here to kill them. For the guy, this question was really shocking, and he didn't understand why the girls thought that. Looking at the little ones, Dean said that they could talk later, but now they needed to get out of here as soon as possible. Remembering that he had killed many guards, the guy first decided to clean up a little and closed the door. After 20 minutes, the door was opened again, but the young man was very tired, although he still wanted to save the girls, saying that it was time for them to go. The girls began to leave the room, and Dean asked him not to look around, because there were a large number of bodies not far from them. Fearing the consequences, the young man also blocked the terrible view that was behind the girls and told them not to turn around. On the large mountain of bodies, Dean only said that they just went to bed and felt great, and now the main thing was to do everything possible to get out of this room, which is why the hero tried to open the elevator with his own hands. At the same time, Fun Ding stood together near the entrance to Section B3. Feeling the approach of enemies, the girl took out her blade, which was located right in her biomechanical prosthesis. Thanks to her brand new blade, Lady was able to easily cut through the huge metal door that stood in front of them. The thick metal was easily cut by a super strong blade, and now they could go into a new sector. Unfortunately, there were guards not far from them, who immediately started shooting, because they saw that strangers had entered the building. The soldiers actually did not yet know what enemies would come here, because they had no chance of victory. Using parts of the metal door as a shield, the uninvited guests entered Sector B3 and began to attack. None of the guards present were able to hit the super-fast opponents, which already destroyed half of the team. As it turned out, the elevator was activated, and someone gradually began to climb to the floor of Section B3. This was the same mysterious mercenary who was the strongest warrior of Hokan. Upon entering the room, the guy immediately noted that his enemies were really funny. Pharaoh was very happy about this turn of events, because he saw that the hero had appeared, and they really wanted to fight him. Meanwhile, in the elevator shaft, the young man did everything possible to save the children, and he put one girl on his shoulders, while simultaneously climbing the cable. The captive girls very much doubted that this guy would help them, but they understood that there was simply no other way out, besides going with him. In fact, they thought that if they resisted this young man, he would kill them. Some time later, all the girls were safe, and the hero asked them to wait, because the innocent girls needed to stay here, safe, while he scouted out the situation. First, the guy needed to get into the elevator in order to get to the next floor. Immediately after this, the boy began to open the door with his knife in order to enter the room. After a small gap was created in the doorway, the smart guy immediately threw grenades. These grenades were truly unexpected for the guards, because they did not understand where they came from. Thanks to the ingenuity of the protagonist, he now had the opportunity to sneak into the room unnoticed in order to attack his enemies. Having made his way into the room, he easily neutralized several guards who were right next to the elevator. Seeing another opponent who was different from the previous ones, the young man was immediately shocked by this outcome of events. Also not far from the enemy stood the pharaoh along with Fun Din, which surprised him even more. The enemy was indeed very glad that all his rivals had gathered, and now wanted to begin the battle. The strongest enemy immediately assumed that they would attack him in a group, but as it turned out, the main character turned out to be the enemy of the pharaoh, which made this battle much stronger for the mercenary. Laughing, the main character exclaimed that his opponent was Fun Ding. For the girl, this was clearly a surprise, because she did not understand why the newcomer decided that she was his opponent. Noticing that his rivals were busy, Dean Eno decided to leave this room, but they immediately aimed weapons at him so that he would not go anywhere. Looking at this guard, the guy understood that the security on this floor was better than on B2, and even after his attack, many enemies could still stand. The strongest enemy ordered that Dean be held by guards while he fought with two other villains. Pharaoh did not like these words at all, and he considered his opponent extremely arrogant. Using a poisonous touch, the clever killer decided to defeat his opponent with just one blow. As it turned out, this battle would not be as easy as the pharaoh thought, which is why he received a blow straight to the stomach. A blow of such force was truly impressive, and Killer could not even understand how this was possible. The enemy only said that the pharaoh must continue to lie down, and if he gets up, he will be a corpse. Even the snake began to stop the pharaoh, saying that he should listen to the enemy and not move, because this is the only way he can see the real strength of this woman. In fact, the enemy really wanted to fight with the girl, because she was the star of today. For Fun Ding, this technique was truly impressive, and she was amazed, but she also understood that it would not work against her. The clever scoundrel knew that the girl's aura belonged to metal. This technique could not harm her. To face such a strong opponent, fire is necessary because fire melts metal, which is why the fifth form of fire technique was used. Rapidly approaching the lady, the enemy did everything possible to carry out an attack. Fun was prepared for this and also used the metal technique to strike. All of them collided, but the girl understood that her opponent was indeed extremely strong. Having made the blow, a fog arose, behind which I could see what consequences the girl received from the blow. Fortunately, she was not injured, only she was in a little pain, which she did not expect to see, because her opponent was even able to release a large amount of energy, which is very interesting. It was impossible to hide his strength from the enemy, because he felt the energy of the girl who was stronger than anyone he had ever met, and if Fun Ding decided to fight him and won, then Hoken would be her next target. Some time later, the girls continued to listen to everything from the elevator shaft, and did not understand what was happening there. The kids understood that there were explosions in the room, and they should have fought, but for some reason everything was calm, and the girls did not know how long they could stay here. One of the brave girls decided that they needed to go down. If their savior wins, then he won't do anything to them either, and the enemies won't be able to do anything just because they say that they were kidnapped. Realizing that they had been here for a long time, each of the girls realized that they did not even have the money to live a normal life in the city. The hero, meanwhile, continued to stand and fight, and was surrounded by a large number of guards who did not give him the opportunity to leave. The trained mercenaries were armed with daggers and could attack at any moment. The tired hero understood that it looked like his opponents would fight without weapons, as if they were afraid of catching their own. Suddenly, the villains began their attack, and grabbed knives and decided to attack. Fortunately, the guy was easily able to fight off the first guard, who brazenly tried to stab him. The battle was indeed very difficult for the young man, because he was immediately attacked by a large number of opponents. There were many more enemies, and they were stronger than those that were on the same B2. Dean Eno also understood that he could not heal himself. There were also 4 children in the elevator shaft who needed to be rescued, which is why he realized that he needs to get out of here while his team is still fighting their strongest opponent. Fun Ding's battle continued, and the strongest enemy attacked with the strongest attacks in order to defeat the girl. For a scoundrel, these were truly impressive skills, because he did not understand how the lady could stop his blow with her bare hands. The tired girl was proud of her skills, but understood that the enemy was really strong, because his martial art is about opening and closing energy in the body, which is similar to the powder chamber in a cannon. Indeed, first the cannon is loaded with gunpowder, and then the strongest shot comes. It is very strong and ferocious. This surprised the mercenary even more, because he did not think that the lady knew so much about the ancient martial art. Then she should know that if she did not dodge such a blow, she would simply die. The force that was supposed to be struck was like a shot from a huge cannon, which was now supposed to hit Fun Din directly. The enemy only shouted that the girl needed to prepare for the fact that she was going to die. The brave girl decided to use her magical abilities to impress her enemy. Thus, by using magic, she could move directly behind her opponent. All the time the scoundrel underestimated her and thought that she was not capable of defeating him. As it turned out, the girl's words were indeed true, and thus she was easily able to move directly behind the enemy's back. The enemy is also a very capable and strong martial artist, which is why he was able to dodge with ease. The fight continued, and the heroine constantly tried to attack using her blade. Using his strength, the enemy stopped the dagger with his palms so that the girl could not attack him. However, having stopped the dagger, the enemy began to think that this was fate, and the occult must be completely destroyed. The girl no longer had the opportunity to fight with her dagger, because it was also completely destroyed. The ferocious warrior used a stepped stone strike to end the battle. Such a sight really shocked Fun Ding, because she did not understand whether such a strong opponent was really fighting with her. Using magic, the scoundrel was able to push the girl several tens of meters to the side, delivering his strongest blow. It seemed that after such a serious blow, Fun Ding would no longer be able to fight, because she was completely exhausted. Meanwhile, the villain continued to attack and did everything possible to destroy the girl. Stopping the enemy's fist, Fun Ding exclaimed that his energy was weaker than hers, and this blow was impressive because she was not sure that she could stop him. Stepping aside, the enemy began to think about whether this was really an occult force, because he felt the loss of his life force. In fact, the girl had a secret, because her enemy killed many red gloves, not only to protect Hawken, but also so that no one would know the secrets of his ancient art. The enemy became even more angry at this statement and began to shout that the blow was too weak and he did not use all his strength. Pharaoh, meanwhile, was thinking about the fact that he did not know that his art of the Eastern sect had reached a good level. The snake watched Ding Yino's fight, and only thought that their opponent, named by Yechen, had completely mastered this art, and was a much better fighter than the main character. Experiencing severe pain, Pharaoh decided to ask the snake why it did not want to come out, because in the form of a snake a person is much stronger than their opponents, and there are no ones here who could compare with him. The cunning snake did not understand what the young man was talking about, but he began to talk about how receiving the techniques of the ancient art would help him get closer to the level of God. This statement was extremely popular with the man who possessed incredible strength and had the title of White Glove. The snake began to rejoice. She laughed, exclaiming that this was a really interesting proposal. However, the battle continued, and Fun Ding began to use all her power to confront the villain. Bai Yechen was a very serious rival, and his strength with the girl was truly equal, because they could not help but hurt each other. For the enemy, this superpower was truly strange, because he saw that the girl's abilities were harming herself. If they continued to fight, the outcome would be unknown. Raising her hands, the alarmed lady said that the enemy might let her go and keep Hawken because she was semi-invalid. The determined scoundrel had no intention of giving up, causing him to exclaim that he would not stop this fight. Realizing that the enemy did not want to end the battle, Fun Ding decided to use her magical abilities in full force, because she had no other choice but to kill the enemy. The fat belly was watching everything that was happening, and hoped that he was about to find out what power Fun Ding had. I turned to the servants. The fat belly ordered them to tell one of the 4 knights, Red Gloves and named Black Stone, that there is a task for him in the city of Dac. The mercenaries nearby watched in surprise at the girl's abilities. Each of those present understood that in front of them was another Red Glove who mastered the occult arts, but they did not think that they would be able to meet them, one of the Red Gloves in the world of new humanity. This statement interested the young man, and he decided to find out what kind of new humanity this was. The guard decided to explain that the hero has excellent physical fitness and some specific abilities, and Dr. Hawken has been studying people like him for a long time. The wounds on the protagonist's body heal quickly, and there is also an inexplicable physical strength, as if he is from a new humanity. But the mercenaries still decided to make sure of this and check whether the guy was really from the new humanity, and whether he was so strong. The naive scoundrel received a blow right in the face, because he overestimated his abilities, thinking that he could defeat Dean. At the same time, another enemy behind continued his attack and pointed a knife straight at the young man's back. Using his agility, Dean was able to dodge the unexpected blow. Taking one enemy hostage, the hero began to talk about how he has superpowers, and they angered him, which is why he will kill all the guards here. Looking at his backpack, Dean also realized that he only had 2 smoke bombs left in his backpack, which lasted 120 seconds, and he thought that 60 seconds would be enough for all of this. But he couldn't do anything with those 2 enemies, because they are clearly much stronger. The determined young man exclaimed that he would first finish off all the guards in this room, and then deal with the strongest enemies. Meanwhile, Fun Ding began to take on her true form, and asked the enemy if he really wanted to know what she was capable of. Using such strong abilities, Bai Yechen should not close his eyes to see absolutely all the attacks that will be used on him. At that same second, a powerful explosion occurred at the place where the girl was. Using her supernatural abilities, Elodie was able to perform multiple attacks on her enemy in a split second. Fun Ding decided to tell her enemy that her ability is called Shura. Falling to his knees, the enemy did not understand why the woman who was fighting against him was so strong, and could not even believe that he would die today. A technique called Shura is the fury of wars. The more furious the battle, the stronger and faster the girl stopped. Due to the fact that the battle intensifies with every second of fury, even if the enemy has an energy shield, her hands will still be able to destroy anything. None of the magical attacks are comparable to the technique that Fun Ding used. Using her strongest attack, the lady invited the enemy to surrender, saying that today she was not going to kill anyone anymore, and would only take her people. The opponent simply could not accept defeat, and exclaimed that this cannot be. After all, ancient martial arts cannot fail. The man's strength gradually began to increase, as if he had improved his skills and acquired new skills that he wanted to show in battle. Watching her enemy, the girl thought that she would not be able to last long in battle, because without the control of her armor, her energy causes severe pain. This technique that Bai Yechen used before was not his strongest, but now he wanted to show what the ancient arts were truly capable of. In order to demonstrate his full strength, the enemy used a full step technique, and began to swing his fist to strike, because this technique was capable of killing even a god. Suddenly, a backpack, which someone had thrown nearby, began to fly very nearby. As it turned out, it was the main character, and he deliberately threw his enemy's backpack, after which he took aim with a pistol. The smart guy immediately fired a shot right at the backpack. The pistol shot caused a huge explosion because the bullet was aimed straight at the backpack. From the strong explosion, Fun Ding flew several tens of meters to the side, after which, the tired and exhausted girl crashed into the wall and created a giant hole in it. This unexpected attack did not stop Bai Yechen, and he continued to move towards the girl to strike. But coming closer, the scoundrel did not understand where Fun Ding had gone, because she had literally just been in this place. The entire B3 sector was filled with smoke, and it looked like that kid had killed absolutely all the guards, and Bai realized that he needed to get his act together. Concentrating all his power, the adversary began to try to find out where his enemies were. Thanks to the concentration of energy, Bai Yechen was able to see that the opponent was very close. At the same time, Pharaoh had already come to his senses and began to look around. Watching everything that was happening, the man could not understand where Fun Din and that other boy were. Like a friend, Fun Din herself, whom the pharaoh had previously searched for, began to run nearby. The alarmed ally decided to find out if the girl was okay and if she was able to defeat the guy. Realizing that she could not win, the lady began to say that her armor was broken, she could no longer use her strength, and their opponent was indeed very strong. Before the smoke clears, they need to leave here as quickly as possible, because the enemy could find them at any minute. Unexpectedly, someone nearby began to attack. Hearing that Fun Ding was saying that they had received information about ancient martial arts, so they would return here soon. Having reacted in time, the heroine was easily able to defeat the impudent snake that tried to bite her. The alarmed man did not understand why the fat belly attacked her partner, and why he did it right now. Because of the incident, Pharaoh immediately began to apologize, saying that he did not give this command to the snake. I understand that this is all a trap. The girl immediately pushed him away and said that the killer themselves often fall into a trap. Observing the snake's body, Fun Ding began to reach for its head in order to study it. The scoundrel who watched everything happening through the snake understood that this was such a rare opportunity, which is why he didn't want to let the girl leave here just like that. Using the snake, the scoundrel decided to neutralize Fun Ding, and used magical abilities on her that were supposed to paralyze her. Not understanding how to prevent such an outcome of events, the man only observed everything that was happening. After which, he grabbed the girl, preventing her from falling to the floor. Realizing what happened, Pharaoh knew that Fun Ding could not withstand such a simple blow because she was severely wounded. Now it was completely incomprehensible to the man why the fat belly wanted to grab Fun Ding, but still he decided to save her, which is why he picked her up and headed for the exit. Because of the thick smoke around, it was completely impossible to see exactly where to go. Suddenly, an enemy nearby exclaimed that the pharaoh should look at what he had done, because now he was trying to escape from here like an outcast. Meanwhile, the hero helped the girls get out of the elevator shaft and apologized for keeping them waiting for a long time. Entering the room, he asked the children to stick with him and not lag behind. The boy also asked the girls to keep their voices down, because there might still be bad guys in this room. And this was really so, because at that very second the pharaoh crashed straight into the wall, not far from the main character. As if nothing had happened, Dean Eno continued to move on, saying that children should not pay attention to this man, because he is a bad guy. The beaten man began to turn to the hero, saying that Fun Ding was still there and he could save her. Turning around, the young man only exclaimed that he did not want to do this, and was not going to save anyone else besides the children. Having said goodbye to the scoundrel, the guy began to leave, and Pharaoh did not understand why he was doing this. The ally did not understand why Ding Inua did this to Fun Ding, because she accepted him into the red glove, and he is so cold-blooded. In fact, Fun Ding Yi taught him to be cold-blooded, because a killer should be cold-blooded, ruthless and selfish, because this is right. The pharaoh countered this argument by saying that the guy couldn't kill Hawken without the girl, but in reality, Din Eno didn't expect her to help, and it doesn't matter whether she's here or not. The exhausted scoundrel said at the last moment that there was a red moon test. This was the only way to become a red glove because the test is incredibly difficult. If the hero enters the test, he will not be able to come out alive unless he passes the test. Pharaoh knew that Din Eno wanted more than just to be a killer, but without a girl, he couldn't pass this test. For the guy it didn't matter, because he never expected help from others, and he knew that the pharaoh had his own ability. Din Eno is now half a new person, and he can pass the blood moon test himself. These statements only began to make the pharaoh laugh, and he began to laugh loudly. After all, the experienced mercenary believed that Din Eno was too naive, because he did not know the rules of this world. Because the young man thought that the Blue Cave were the only ones behind the red gloves, but there are gangster mercenaries and all sorts of complex power groups that he cannot even imagine. These factions control the fate and future of their entire world of killers, therefore, the blood moon test will not be an easy choice. If he does not want to be trampled, then it is necessary to save Fun Ding. The young man really believed in everything that Pharaoh said, but he looked down on him too much. After all, in fact, Fun Ding is just a finger in a red glove, and how can she know this best? Smiling, Pharaoh only exclaimed that Fun Ding has a very long history, and therefore she really knows everything. Meanwhile, the girl lay unconscious on the floor and could no longer continue the battle. Bai Yechen communicated with Hoken and said that the entire battle was already over, and one enemy had escaped, the other two were seriously injured. The mad doctor first decided to thank his best bodyguard, then he exclaimed that in this case, Bai Yechen should do as he always does, namely, to finish off all the enemies who dared to sneak into the laboratory. Lifting Fun Ding by the neck, Bai Yechen wanted to finish the battle he had started and finally win. Although in reality he never had a fight, which is why he even felt sorry for killing the girl. She and her abilities are good, but if he kills her now, it will be a shame for him as a martial arts heir. However, the guy had no choice because he received a direct order. Because of the order, the girl had to die here and now, and also say goodbye to the occult art. While trying to strike, Bai Yechen continued his thoughts and thought about whether it was really worth killing the girl. Suddenly, someone turned to him, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. It was the main character, and he exclaimed that he understands that Bai Yechen wants to be a hero, but killing this unconscious woman is too low for a hero. In this connection, the young man exclaimed that he could give him the girl, and tell the boss that he had already destroyed the body, and they would both be happy. Then Bai Yechen would be able to keep his hero mask. Even for the pharaoh, these statements were surprising, and he did not expect the young man to act this way. The big man even began to think about actually letting the girl go, giving her to Ding Eno. Suddenly, the guy decided to agree, saying that he would do it. Throwing the girl to the floor, Bai exclaimed that now his opponent could take her. Ding Eno was even a little surprised at this turn of events, and wanted to pick up Ding Eno and then leave here. Coming closer, the hero was about to pick up his partner, but the arrogant scoundrel knew that this was an excellent opportunity to strike, which is why he began to perform a hidden attack technique with the help of ancient martial arts. As it turned out, in fact, the main character expected this, and used the 8 extremes of boxing, namely the first movement. Using ancient arts techniques, he was able to stop his opponent at first because the attack was truly predictable. Immediately after this, the 8 extremes and boxing technique was applied, namely the second movement. Using all his strength and power, the young man struck the enemy in order to distract him. But this was not the end yet, because now Ding Eno once again applied the 8 extremes of boxing, namely the third movement. Thanks to the third movement, it was again possible to deliver another powerful blow, which made the enemy feel pain. Unfortunately, the enemy was able to withstand such a strong blow, and the young man immediately realized that he was really strong. Bai Yechen realized that this technique was the 8 extremes of boxing, and was surprised because his opponent also used ancient martial arts. The enemy had absolutely no injuries, and he decided to find out what exactly Ding Eno was doing in the occult sect. The hero immediately couldn't even understand what Bai Yechen was asking him about, because he was focused on the battle. This was surprising for the enemy, because Dean Eno did not know the history of these two sects, although he himself was proficient in martial arts. That is why these 3 blows were so insignificant, because the hero is strong on the outside, but weak on the inside, and is not a member of the ancient martial arts sect. Bai Yechen immediately realized that Ding Yino was picked up somewhere and tried to teach him, but he is trash and just a pathetic and petty brat who has nothing to do with ancient martial arts. And now, the main character faced the fate of death, because Bai Yechen was going to show off his 3 strikes so that the enemy would know what real martial art was. Raising his hand, Dean Yino decided to ask his enemy to wait a moment. After all, despite what he had just said, the hero was sure that it was necessary to move away from the girl. The enemy did not listen to him, and was preparing to make his attack. Bai Yechen sincerely believed that the guy who was going to fight against him had better take care of himself. For the young man it was truly an amazing sight, because he saw real ancient martial arts. According to the guy, his enemy was not serious from the beginning. First he fought with Fun Ding, and then caught him with 3 blows, like some kind of crazy person. For some reason, Bai Yechen not only did not get tired, but became even more energetic than before. Thanks to aura, he can control the air flow. The hero continued to think that his opponent was like a Superman, and he must have reached the limit, but now the guy could also hit harder, because he understood that his opponent had spent his strength. Thus, the young man decided that he would attack his enemy with the most serious wounds, then he should definitely surrender. Moving with incredible speed, the hero was about to make a blow, and began to swing his fist. The enemy sensed that his opponent was going to use 3 strikes and he was tired of it. Because of this, Bai Yechen immediately attacked the main character, using one of his strongest attacks. All his energy was invested in this blow. Thanks to this blow, Ding Eno's lungs should become simply useless. After all, the force of the blow contributes to the fact that it becomes impossible to breathe. Laughing, the guy exclaimed that he didn't care about his energy, and all he needed to know now was that there was an enemy in front of him. The enemy became even more angry, because he wanted to explain what energy really is. Once again the villain tried to make a blow that was literally full of energy. With such a serious blow, Ding Eno's helmet even broke, because the power of the attack was truly impressive. Due to the force of the blow, Dean began to literally fly in the air, and experienced incredibly severe pain. Continuing to fall, the young man realized that his enemy was not affected by a technique called eightfold boxing. The enemy still decided to answer the silent question of the protagonist. It was the energy that makes him strong, which is the core of the ancient martial arts. This is also the biggest difference between the 2 people that martial arts use. Also, the enemy immediately realized that the young man had recently learned these 3 blows. Unable to bear such insolence on the part of Bai Yechen, the hero decided to attack again, shouting that he should stop pretending, because his energy could not be endless. The battle continued, and the guy did everything possible to defeat his opponent. As an ancient martial artist, Bai Yechen had long heard about the powerful and hegemonistic 8 extremes boxing, and he didn't think so. But unfortunately, the young man did not know the essence of this technique, and his soft and weak blow disappointed his opponent. Bai Yechen assumed that Ding Inua heard about these skills and decided to use them, but he has absolutely no energy support, because he just learned the style and nothing more. Feeling incredible anger, the guy hit his opponent with all his might, using an Iron Mountain strike. The scoundrel didn't care at all about this, because he was able to block the blow and did not experience any pain at all. Thus, it was now Ding Inua's turn to take the blow and defend against Bai Yechen. All this time the young man was thinking that there really was no salvation, and the enemy would now finish him off. The time has come to strike, and the enemy used all his power to deliver a powerful blow directly to the main character. Bai continued to approach and exclaimed that this blow would send his opponent to hell. Suddenly, a pharaoh appeared behind him, who was about to strike an unexpected blow. Coming closer, he grabbed Bai Yechen and shouted that he was caught, because the pharaoh wanted to detain the enemy. All these actions were taken only so that Ding Yingo could take Fun Ding and escape from here. 2 minutes ago the main character talked with the pharaoh and said that he could save Fun Ding, but the young man also understood that he could not cope with this strong guy alone. That's why the hero asked the pharaoh to stop this guy alone, literally at the last minute. This was their only chance for victory in this battle, as well as the opportunity to save the children and Fun Ding. I sigh heavily, The young man could not imagine that Pharaoh was like a woman during a fight, but he was dressed like a scapegoat. After which, Dean Eno went to fight and told the children that they need to wait for his signal, because he will try to create an opportunity for them to escape from this place, and if there is no signal, it means that they will all be locked here. Some time later, the pharaoh continued to hold by Yechen, and shouted for the main character to take Fun Ding away from here. Because of such an event, the enemy was very angry, and did not understand how such a weak enemy was holding him back. As it turned out, the pharaoh also possessed occult arts, and used a poisonous bite on his opponent. Thanks to the occult technique, the scoundrel began to experience incredible pain, as if he had been bitten by a poisonous snake. At the same time, the wounded hero returned to the cold-blooded girl and wanted to help her in order to leave this evil place. Ding Inua saved Fun Ding for the second time. He went ahead to get out of this place. Looking at this fight, the young man understood that Pharaoh was really cool, but he still wouldn't be able to last long against such a strong opponent. Trying to get out of the grip, Bai Yechen did everything possible to defeat the green-haired guy. Using the strongest martial arts techniques, the scoundrel again continued to use technique after technique in order to free himself. But as it turned out, all these techniques were in vain, because the pharaoh was much more flexible than ordinary people, and his occult arts also give him abilities. While rescuing the mercenary, the hero also shouted to the children to follow him, because he wanted to get them out of here. Some time later, together they arrived at a place that looked like an abandoned mine. Immediately after this, the guy nevertheless decided to enter the carriage in order to leave this place by train. Having shouted for everyone to hold firm, the guy turned on the train, and the rescued captives began to get out. The train was moving at incredible speed, and it seemed that Dean Eno was still able to save everyone who was so dear to him. Continuing to ride the train, the hero thought that this time he really screwed up, missed his target, and almost died. Dr. Hawken deserves to be listed as a 3-star task, and testing a person, bodyguards with ancient matter arts are very serious obstacles. It was also completely unclear what this doctor was doing with the children who were in his laboratory. The alarmed guy could not understand what kind of new humanity this was, and who all these people really were. And the Holy Land as well as the occult arts were used by his companions. It seems that Bai Yechen has a certain history with ancient martial arts. And the most important thing in everything that happened before is that Fun Din has a long history. That's why the boys would need to figure this out with the girl when they get out of here. Fortunately, this was supposed to happen very soon, because the train stopped. Addressing the children, the guy told them that first he needed to go first in order to check whether it was safe to go further. Coming off the train, the boy began to experience incredible pain, because he felt that the last battle was very difficult for him. Continuing to walk further, Dean Eno tried to get to the desired exit as quickly as possible, but he realized that it was extremely difficult for him to go. The exit turned out to be very close, and now Dean only needs to lead all the captives to freedom. Communicating with each other, the children did not understand what this guy was going to do to them. None of them had any idea what exactly this guy was thinking, because he was seriously injured, and probably wouldn't be able to take them out of here. The wounded young man nevertheless entered the train and said that he had found a van, and there was a road behind the cave. He also pulled a cart and asked the children to lift the woman and load her. The smart children complied with the hero's request and began to drag Fun Ding, and Ding walked with them. Some time later, they were already approaching the car, and the boy asked them to count on him. Having loaded the mercenary inside, it was decided to move on. There were keys in the car, and the hero still managed to start it, after which they began to drive. The children were very scared to ride in a car with an unknown uncle, but they were still grateful that he saved them. One of the girls noticed that the guy was feeling very bad, but Dean only replied that it didn't matter at all. The young man nevertheless decided to ask the girls if they all lived in Dina City, and as it turned out, this was indeed the case. Confused, one of the girls said that strangers do not belong here, because they only come here for a bad reason. Hearing this, the boy immediately noticed that everyone in this city apparently does not like strangers, just like the taxi driver he met before. I turned to the children. The guy still wanted to know how to get to the city, because he was going to take them home. The little girl immediately exclaimed that they all did not live in the city and could not return home. After all, as it turned out, they all lived in a ghetto, and not in an ordinary city. Meanwhile, events continued to happen in the laboratory, and Bai Yechen returned to Hoken. The man immediately apologized because he didn't keep his promise and only brought one of the 3 guys. The guy I was in the lab was disabled, but the other 2 ran away because of him. Turning to the mercenary, the doctor was really very interested in how people could even escape from him. Bai Yechen only replied that he would not let this happen again, because he was seriously injured, and if the bloody glove caused trouble again, he was afraid that he would no longer be able to fight as well as before. With the last of his strength, the pharaoh exclaimed that Hocken could not escape, because whoever was the target of the red glove would die anyway. The doctor was very happy that the prisoner was talking to him, because he was glad to see him energetic, and also appreciated his red glove, because endless killings are a pleasure for him. Hocken was really impressed that this organization had too many secrets, and they had enough time to get to know each other better. Suddenly, Bai Yechen said that he wanted to see her, but the doctor didn't understand why the guy had such a desire, as if he couldn't just calm down. Nevertheless, Hocken agreed to show the girl and said that she was fine. As it turned out, it was Bai Yechen's sister, and she was sick, and the doctor promised that she would definitely be healed. All this time, the sister was in the flask, and life support was provided with her help. This girl suffered very badly, and even a doctor could not cure her so quickly, which is why it is normal not to see much change as a result of treatment. Because of this, Hocken understood that only he could cure Bai Yechen's sister, but a prerequisite was that no one would interrupt him. Some time later, Bai Yechen threw the pharaoh into the room, saying that it was specially designed for him, and he would regret allowing the 2 criminals to escape from this laboratory. Looking at his opponent, the pharaoh immediately decided to ask if he had really been caught for experimentation. Still, the enemy understood that pharaoh himself had chosen to die voluntarily, and gave him the opportunity to capture him. The green-haired guy just laughed at this, because he wanted to see who was really wrong here. After this, the scoundrel still decided to close the door and asked his captive not to die within a week. Meanwhile, events continued to occur in the ghetto of the city of Dina. Having driven into the ghetto, the hero assumed that the children's house should be nearby, and no matter what their reasons were for not going into the house, it was necessary to get out of the car now. After all, the young man understood that he was seriously injured, and it was better to stay at home than with Hocken. One of the girls decided to turn to the young man and ask what he would do, to which Dean only replied that he was too tired and needed to rest a little. Continuing to look at the guy, the child said that strangers were not welcome here, and he might regret this decision. Taking off one of the gloves, the young man began to think that he needed to contact the blind wizard. But it was unknown what to do with these injuries, because the arm was broken, and there was no way to continue fighting with anyone. About to call the blind wizard, Dean Eno began to think that he could use his tongue to enter a phone number, but suddenly, someone behind him began to approach the car. Some time later, events continued to occur near the clinic. Multiple reporters were interviewing the director about someone with a gun breaking into the hospital last night, and they wanted to know how many people were hurt in that incident. Also, the reporters who came here were interested in whether they had information about the suspect, or whether this would affect the work of the hospital. The policemen decided to say that it was a terrorist attack and they would take it seriously, although they did not know the identity of the suspect and the exact number of victims, but the city police representative promised them that the suspect would get what he deserved. Approaching closer, one of the correspondents decided to ask the director whether the suspect really chose Ward B1 to break into, where there were only a few patients. The man did not know how to answer this question, and exclaimed that he was not a suspect, which is why he did not know his motive. Unexpectedly, Hocken came over and asked Miss if she really wanted the suspect to choose a crowded field to attack. The doctor decided to give an interview, saying that he thought the suspect's purpose was a warning, most likely in response to the theory about the birth of a new human species that the doctor put forward the day before yesterday, and hoped to influence his research, due to which is why I set my sights on the morgue. And thanks to the timely arrival of the police, large losses were avoided. The man also added that 2 workers received minor injuries, only one escaped suspect was seriously injured, and they should not worry, because the suspect does not yet pose any threat to their city. The hospital would still be open as always, and security would be tighter, which made Hocken assure everyone that they could count on them. After all, together with the police, they were going to catch the suspects, and if someone notices people similar to the suspects, then it is necessary to report this to the clinic or the police. As it turned out, the main character was tied to a pipe with handcuffs because someone kidnapped him from a car. The kidnapper turned out to be a man, and he was very glad that his captive woke up. Coming closer to the captured guy, the stranger asked him not to die, because he was going to get rich by turning Dean Eno over to the police. The smart man immediately realized that the guy in front of him was the same suspect who was talked about in the news. Laughing, the young man began to deny it, saying that he could not be a suspect. Immediately the stranger exclaimed that the one who is in front of him is really a suspect, because he saw his van, and knows that in his van, moreover, the guy is seriously injured, and he is exactly the one who was described on the television news. But the villain was really sorry that the girl who was in the truck died, but in any case, her organs could be sold at a good price. Dean immediately began to get very angry, and asked the man if he was sure that the girl was dead, because otherwise, in this case, he had done everything in vain. Continuing to watch the guy, the man said that he was the one who put it in the refrigerator in the truck, and people cannot survive if they lie in a frozen refrigerator for a long time. These words literally made Dean very nervous, because he did not understand how long his partner had lain in the refrigerator, because normal people can only remain alive for half an hour in conditions of -30 degrees Celsius, and it turns out that Fun Ding could die from the cold. The unknown man continued to insist that the young man eat, because he did not want him to die here. All Dean kept saying was that he had to hurry because he had to save the girl who was in the van. As it turned out, the kidnapper understood what Dean Eno was up to, which is why he slipped sedatives into his food. Now the guy needed to eat, after which everything would work out. The stranger forcibly tried to shove food into the main character's mouth. He also threatened him, asking if he wanted to get even more injured. Someone knocked on the door very loudly, as if he was very angry. I understand that it is necessary to check who is knocking on the door. The man ordered the guy to be silent and not to rock the boat, because if something happens, he will prepare him a special treat. Still, the scoundrel decided to open the door in order to see who was knocking. Unexpectedly, the man who was behind the door kicked the villain directly in the stomach with all his strength. Fortunately, it was Fun Ding, who was feeling just fine and could continue to fight. Watching his partner, the young man was very glad that he saw her, and that the kidnapper was wrong, and Fun Ding was alive. But the girl was not very happy, and decided to take revenge on the hero, because he locked her in the refrigerator, and she almost froze to death. Suddenly, the scoundrel decided to continue the battle, and exclaimed that the girl should be afraid of him, because now he would beat her. Along with the girl, another rather strong assistant also came, namely the courier who had previously brought weapons. The giant man hated most of all those people who meddle in other people's affairs. The frightened man decided to ask the thug what he was going to do with him. The courier also noticed that the girl who called him was very rude, but for Fun Ding this was not a problem, and she still asked the thug to finish what he started. Still in great fear, the man shouted that he could not be killed because he had a daughter named Fun. This made the girl incredibly angry, because she thought that the scoundrel said her name just so that he would not be killed. Because of this, the giant continued to attack and approached the frightened man. After all, in fact, the courier saw the person who was lying. Suddenly, a girl exclaimed from behind, and she said that what this man was saying was true, because the baby's name is actually Fun. Standing over the villain, the main character could not believe that the girl was sent to sell her organs, and it was not surprising that this child did not want to return, because it was all because of a father like him. Due to such bad deeds, the young man wanted to finish off this bad father. Laughing, the man began to make excuses. They say that he promises that he will not let his daughter suffer anymore. If he is killed, then no one will be able to take care of his daughter. The girl nevertheless decided to ask her mercenary for a gun, because she wanted to pull off one trick. Without hesitation, the courier gave his gun to Fun Ding, because it seemed like it would be a good idea. As it turned out, Fun wanted to give the girl a gun so that she could make a choice. Both of their names were Fun, which is why the girl wanted to give the girl the opportunity to do what she had wanted for so long. Namely, she needed the gun in order to kill her father. The stunned man began to scream, asking if the people who were near him were crazy, because how could a child kill his father? Even the main character could not understand what was going on here, and only thought that perhaps the girl was simply being tested. The frightened girl continued to watch the gun and thought about what she should do. Still, the little girl decided to take the gun, and slowly extended her hand towards it. Soon after, the gun was pointed directly at the man, who was literally shaking with fear. The father tried his best to convince the girl, saying that he loved her very much. And yet the little girl made a decision, and pointed the gun directly at Fun Din, shouted that she would not kill her father, and those whom she would kill would be them. The big man immediately got angry and asked Fun if she was really tired of living. But still, Fun Ding decided to stop the big man and asked everyone to wait, because she herself was very interested in what would happen next. Starting to cry, the girl shouted for the strangers to get out of her house, or she would shoot them. Fun Ding began to explain to the girl that she probably didn't understand something, because her father kidnapped Ding Eno, and now the little girl assumes that she is aiming at the killers. Fun Ding also decided to remind the little girl that she was saved by a person who was an ally, and she should thank him. The girl's father sold her for money, and it was unknown why the little girl was still protecting him. Continuing to aim at her enemies, Fun exclaimed that she forbade her father to be judged because she voluntarily sold her organs. Her mother died shortly after she was born, so her father had to raise her alone. He couldn't find a job, and he was cheated by others and lost his money. Although the little girl understood that something was wrong with her father, she still wanted to help him repay the debt. So the little girl believed that they, outsiders, should not interfere in the affairs of her family. The big man still could not stand this turn of events, and understood that children did not know how to shoot. The man continually began to move closer to the child, and the girl continued to threaten that she would shoot. This event even began to worry the hero, and he did not understand what the big man was doing, because he was attacking a little girl. Ding decided to shout to Fun Ding to stop the big man, but the girl only remained silent and watched everything that was happening. With every second the man was getting closer and ordered the child to surrender. Starting to scream, little Fun turned away and tried to pull the trigger of the gun. To her surprise, it turned out that the gun had no bullets to shoot its target. The huge man understood that the child in front of him definitely wanted to die, which is why he continued to attack. Suddenly, Fun Ding came closer to the little girl and stood next to her, because she really liked her. Because of this, the determined girl said that she would leave their family alone. Some time later, events continued to occur in one of the houses, which was located in the ghetto. The whole house could hear screams that Fun Din was just examining the wound, and there was nothing wrong with it. But while examining the wound, the young man seemed to think that Fun simply wanted to kill him, because she bandaged the wound very carelessly. All this cruelty on the part of the girl was due to the fact that the main character betrayed the pharaoh, but the guy believed that they were faced with a very strong opponent, and it was impossible to act differently. Even the girl understood that the situation would not change, and what they definitely needed to do was check the wounds of the main character. As soon as the bandage was removed from the guy's hand, Fun immediately got scared and was surprised, because she didn't understand whether there really was a human hand in front of her. Because of this statement, the young man immediately began to panic and wanted to find out what had happened to his hand. Luckily, the arm was fine and wasn't even broken. Looking at his hand, Ding Yino immediately felt that his recovery ability had returned, but for some reason it had not been there before. Coming closer, her ally decided to find out where the guy learned these esoteric abilities. After all, they are friends, and Fun very persistently asked to tell him at least a little about these abilities. The slightly alarmed hero only said that he himself had no idea how exactly he received these abilities. Observing the abilities of the main character, Fun understood that he would soon pay for this, because her abilities were not as crazy as his. Suddenly, a girl nearby exclaimed that this was really unfair, because as a little girl she didn't understand why ladies' wounds didn't recover as quickly, and it would be better if everyone had a similar ability. The sad girl understood that if her mother had such an ability, she would never be able to die. To this the young man only exclaimed that the world is unfair and everything cannot be perfect. The heroine nevertheless decided to come closer to the girl in order to talk to her. Smiling, the girl exclaimed that they were really very similar, although the little girl was luckier because she had a father. But still, Fun Ding wanted to tell little Fun that any changes must be paid for in some way, and everyone who is present in this room has sacrificed a lot, like the main character himself. Meanwhile, the father and the big man returned to the house and shouted that they were back, and also brought medicine and bandages. The man also said that he bought some things for that gentleman. Fun Ding asked him to take the things upstairs, after which the bad father could go to his home. Walking up the stairs, the man heard Fun Ding say that Hokan had hired a lot of guards to protect the hospital. The police have also increased the number of patrols in the hospital, and it will be difficult to carry out their plans. However, there was good news. Namely, next Tuesday, Hokan will travel to Europe to take part in the World Health Conference. Thus, the girl suggested that the doctor should go along with his employees, and this was indeed good news. But there was also bad news. The head of this ghetto, Dole, did not take his eyes off Fun Din, and he is supplying organs to Hokan. The head of the ghetto learned that they were the ones who killed his people and damaged their business, which is why he will be able to find the entire team within 2 days. Still, Fun Din understood that they needed to get out of here as quickly as possible and see what their opponents would prepare for them. At the same time, the man brought medicine and clothes for the main character. What he saw next greatly shocked the ordinary man, because he did not understand how bones could be restored so quickly. Although the young man understood that the bones had not yet been restored, he could already move his arm. Dean Yino suddenly felt that he was starting to lose consciousness, as if he was regenerating too quickly. The little girl's father also bought bandages and some water, and immediately put them on the table. The alarmed man nevertheless decided to find out whether his guests were really killers, and realizing that this was indeed the case, the father begged not to involve his daughter in their affairs. Dean Eno sighed heavily and then said that absolutely everyone here has something to do with this mess. Suddenly, as soon as the hero said the last phrase, a cloudiness immediately appeared in his eyes. After which, the young man again felt as if he had entered another world, and his soul left his body. An unfamiliar voice nearby exclaimed that the flickering on the facade could not hide the truth. A certain entity ordered the hero to open his eyes and see where he was. The concerned guy immediately began to ask, where is that same mysterious entity that is addressing him? After all, now he is no longer a weakling, and wants to find out why he came into this world again. In fact, the entity that spoke to the main character called itself Moron, and he believed that the guy should have died without his protection. Dean Eno's healing cost him his last hopes for life, but he doesn't understand, because the guy is an ordinary mortal. The young man really could not understand what Moron was telling him, and simply listened to him in order to understand why he was here. Looking around, Dean only saw another invisible entity fighting a huge monster, and compared to her, he looked simply insignificant, like an ordinary person against a deity. In the real world, the main character was unconscious, and the man made excuses with all his might, saying that he did nothing to this guy. He only bought water under their supervision, and could not do anything else. At the same time, the big man understood that now Ding Eno could die from powerlessness, and it was necessary to urgently bring him back to consciousness. Unexpectedly, the girl decided to stop him, because she realized something. Namely, that her ally was faced with the same thing that she once faced. Moron continued to talk to the hero, and said that these two energies were constantly destroying his body, too much life force was being consumed to regenerate itself, and he needed to do something. Watching everything that was happening, the young man assumed that the guy not far from him was playing by Yechen. Well, as it turned out, it was the energy that he holds in the main character, and intends to destroy him. And the second essence is the medicine that the doctor made for Ding Eno. Such a statement was truly shocking, because the guy could not even imagine that there would be medicine in his body. Then he remembered the doctor who had previously told him that this was an excellent remedy that Mr. Hokan had come up with. And now, his body simply cannot withstand such a flow of energy, which is why it is gradually collapsing. The mysterious entity asked the guy to remember something, namely, his memories. After all, memories are what make people feel different emotions. The grandfather who taught him Bajiquan and his death, this is the key. Observing an ordinary person, Moron literally ordered him to release all these feelings. The young man still could not understand what he needed to do, and again decided to ask the entity. The invisible being exclaimed that this flame led to the depths of his memory, and it was necessary to follow it. Thanks to this flame, you will again be able to feel the sensations that you had earlier during the upheaval. Meanwhile, Fun Ding stood over the main character, and thought that he had an internal wound, because he fought with Bai Yechen. Only those with an ancient martial art could suffer such an injury, and ordinary people would simply die, but for some reason, this Ding Eno is fighting death right now. After laughing, the girl began to turn to the main character, saying that he urgently needed to wake up, because they would be leaving now. Suddenly, someone started knocking on the door very hard, as if they wanted to knock it down. The big man decided to ask the man if it was his friend knocking on the door like that, but it turned out that this was not the case. Realizing the complexity of the situation, the guard ordered the man to go to the top floor and report the incident to Fun Din.